Hi guys! This manhwa is called, Father, I Don't Want This Marriage. Enjoy watching! The story begins when a girl is reading a tragic novel. In the original story, Javelian, the female lead, had a terrible life. Her mother died when she was younger while her father never gave even a bit of attention to his only daughter. That kind of relationship in her family continues as she grows up. Until her 18th birthday came, and it had an extravagant celebration. Despite the excessive decoration of her party, her father did not even attend to her special occasion. That day was filled with sadness as she went to the quiet garden to cry her heart out. But she did not expect that someone would see her vulnerable state. There was a man who showed her kindness, and she was comforted by him. For the girl, it was the attention she had been craving since she was little. Mikhail was like a savior who saved her from distress. After that night, she developed her feelings for him. She fell in love and did everything to have a romantic relationship with him. But even though she succeeded, things did not go according to her desire. No matter how much she pursued, the guy eventually rejected her as he declared his love for the royal princess. Soon after, the royal princess got poisoned in a banquet they attended. The poor Javelian was blamed for that incident. They accused her of poisoning the royal princess because Mikhail chose her over the duke's daughter. She extremely declined that accusation. Even though she bullied all the women who approached Mikhail and hated the princess for taking his fiancée, she never wished her to die. The emperor enragedly ordered his people to throw the lady into the prison immediately. The duke, her father, volunteered to do it. He doubted him at first, but the duke eventually convinced him, as he said that he would take his daughter to the shadow room. Because of that, Javelian could not believe that her father did not take her side. Hearing her father locking her in the shadow room made her realize that he never loved her to just throw her like that. Ever since she was little, he has never been there for her. She was already used to the treatment she gained from her father. As they entered the room where the high criminals were tortured, the duke told her to endure it and gave her a sword like he was telling her to end her life instead. She begged her father to not to leave her, but he never listened and turned his back on her. While she was crying alone in that dark room, she suddenly heard that the crown prince wanted to talk to the person who harmed her sister. From the other side, she heard the threat of making her suffer to force her to speak before she drew her last breath. Because of that, she immediately took the sword out and decided to take away her life, rather than experiencing persecution from the crown prince. The female lead only wanted to be loved, but her life just tragically ended there. After that scene, the novel stopped updating. The reader finished reading it even though she was disappointed that she did not know the ending of the story. That day, she was expecting a visitor. After making her wait for 3 hours, the man came and he inquired about her reason to call him in her place. When she emphasized how late he was offended like he was being called to be criticized. As the reader of that novel, the girl became the female lead who ended her existence after being abandoned by the one she loved. Because of her expected tragic fate, Javelian decides to break up with Mikhail to cut the things that will lead her to her end. The girl was reincarnated from a woman who has a normal life while looking for a job. Unfortunately, she was hit by a car on her way to her part-time job. That incident resulted in her end and reborn as the villainess of the novel, Javelian. In her current life, she previously remembered her 2 years of life with her relationship with Marquis Mikhail Albert Hessen. Upon remembering it, she realized how faithful she was to him, which resulted in her bullying the women who approached her fiancé. Mikhail was the only person who gave attention to a girl who was never loved by her father. Since that night when they first met, she became obsessively in love with him. But now, she realizes that she must save her life by cutting off her relationship with him. The Marquis could not believe her at first, but when she clarified how sincere she was, he was convinced and madly slammed her table while exclaiming to not show herself again. After that, Javelian apologized to him for everything as she wished for his happiness before leaving him. On the other hand, Mikhail assumed that it was just her way to attract his attention, but he wondered why he became upset because of that. The daughter of the Duke felt relieved upon successfully cutting him off from her life. When she was about to go to her room, she saw her father across her way. Her father is Duke Regis Adri Ploen, her only family and the only sword master in their nation. Originally, the man who forsakes his daughter. Currently, instead of aiming for her affection, she decided to go after his riches to fulfill her goal of living her life as long as possible. She approached her father as she assumed that his job must have drained him. But the Duke did not respond, which filled awkwardness between them. So, she just advised him to have a rest, as she would also do the same to escape from that scenario. Before she could leave completely, her father responded that he did not go to his training on that day. He also noticed that her daughter returned early, so he questioned about it. In the original novel, the lady kept stalking Mikhail, which made her constantly returning late. But now, she revealed that she broke up with the Marquis. Seeing the reaction of her father to her news, she deduced the reason why the Duke favored Mikhail was because he was his underling. To provide further details, Javelian added that she does not want to be with someone who does not love her. She assumed that the Duke might be expecting the Marquis to be his son-in-law. After all, having an only daughter would be a future problem when it comes to his inheritance. Because of that assumption, she exclaimed that she wanted to marry someone who would love her because she wanted to be happy. Their conversation ended when her father left without a word. She thought that her father did not want to talk with her anymore. It reminded her of the original story, where the Duke abandoned her in the prison like a heartless father. While watching her father leave, she promised in her mind that she would live a quiet life, as she wished him to leave her alone like he used to, so she could live longer. When the night came, the maid was on her way to the room of the lady. She was worried that Javelian must be full of rage, since it was the day that she broke up with the Marquis. Knowing the daughter of the Duke, she liked to destroy everything she could reach out of frustration. As she entered the room to tell that her bath was already prepared, she caught the lady crying in silence. Because of that, Javelian was horrified that someone saw her and felt embarrassed about it. The maid inquired if she was alright, but the lady just responded that she was too tired, so she just decided to take a bath the next day. She saw how uncomfortable Marilyn, the maid, was. So, she changed her tone to lessen the uneasiness she was feeling. Because of that, Marilyn immediately apologized and hurriedly went out. Seeing her reaction made Javelian swear from that moment to treat their servants nicely. In the hallway, Marilyn was talking to herself about how pitiful the lady was when she saw her in her room. Suddenly, the Duke came out and heard her talking about the lady who was crying, so he urged the maid to report him everything she saw. For a reason, Javelian woke up on a good day. She had not done stretching yet when the maid came and reported that the Duke wanted to have breakfast with her. At the dining table, it was very unusual that her father ate with her in a breakfast. He even added food to her plate as he encouraged her to eat more. She assumed that the reason for the Duke's strange action was because he thought her daughter was pathetic. After becoming the Duke, her father headed both the Central Army and the Royal Guard. He was the hero of their nation, having led them to a decisive victory in the conflict that took place 2 decades ago. Compared to his significant fame in society, her daughter never had a friend, and she only focused herself on forcing her love for Mikhail. While eating, the Duke suddenly asked her about her ideal type. He just reasoned that he was curious about it when, as far as Javelian remembered, he never had been interested in her in the past. She assumed that her father was planning to involve her on a date with another man to find a suitable son-in-law to become his heir in the future. Javelian did not want that idea, so she answered that she desired a man who was stronger than her father. She knew that it was hard to find that kind of standard, so she would never have to get married. But when her father questioned if she was being honest, she specified that her father was the pride of their country, so she wanted to marry a man who came from a noble family possessing wealth, honor, and skills, and one who got a face. After that, she does not really know what was gotten into her father's mind when he invited her to go out with him. That day, they dressed and went to the loud street of Agate, where they could buy a lot of stuff. Her father bought everything she was just touching and staring at. While they were at the market, they saw a woman who had a sword on her side. Her father suddenly excused himself and went to that woman. She assumed that they knew each other as she thought about the missing previous Queen's Guard captain. After a while, she heard the people murmuring when they recognized her as the notorious daughter of the Duke. Because of that, she tried to escape from them and went to a quiet place. It happened that she ran into the armor shop, which was owned by a masculine man, and she realized that she had gone into the wrong place. The owner assumed that a beautiful lady was his new customer, so he accommodated her immediately. As she tried to deny that she was a customer, a mysterious man wearing a hood came to pay for the item he wanted to purchase. She looked at him and saw his red eyes. The man also noticed her, which led them to make eye contact. But the mysterious man did not like how she was staring. The lady admitted that the mysterious man was undeniably handsome, enough to make a lady like her stare at him. When he noticed the lady beside her staring, he immediately wanted her to stop. Because of that, Javelian tries to save herself from claiming that he just purchased the item she has been looking for, even though she is unaware of what item is it. It seems like she put herself in embarrassment when she was informed that it was an armor polish. The owner assumed that she might be planning to clean all her accessories in their house, so he recommended that a single polish would not be enough. He immediately left to look for more of it in their storage, as he could make a big sale from the lady. Suddenly, the mysterious man paid 1 gold coin for the armor polish and left immediately. Javelian chased her when she thought he forgot to claim his change. Seems like the man did not care about it, which made the lady explain that he paid the amount that could sustain the 2 weeks of food from the family of commoners. It could also equally cost 10 armor polishes. Meanwhile, the owner returned with 10 items of it, which she admits that she does not need. After that encounter, the man with a hood was informed that Duke Plowen requested him to go to the house of the Duke. When the Crown Prince shortly replied to the knight, the attendant wondered if there was something happened. He just suddenly remembered the encounter he had at the market, and replied that nothing happened before he left. At the market, the Duke was wondering why his daughter returned with 10 armor polishes. That long day tired the lady as her feet started to hurt, because they had been strolling since morning. Unfortunately, they had to use stairs, which would probably make it more difficult for her. When she made steps to ascend, her heels suddenly stripped off and lost her balance. Good thing, her father was there to catch her. The Duke decided to carry her as they returned to their carriage. Javelian did not know clearly why her father was acting like that after ignoring her since she was little. She tried to convince her father to put her down, but he did not listen and he decided to go back home. While carrying her, the Duke said that he started thinking about a suitable person for her. Due to exhaustion, she could not hear his voice clearly. Duke Plowen noticed her condition and inquired about it. The lady tried to assure him that she was fine, but she just suddenly lost consciousness in his arms. The Duke was worried seeing how his daughter passed out while he was carrying her. He was scared that something would happen again to Javelian. While the lady was unconscious, she could hear her father pleading with her to wake up. It was strange to know his father would cry because of her condition. When she woke up, she thought that she had just a terrible dream. She saw their family doctor, Alan, with their maids who was worried about her. According to him, she had been sleeping for 3 days. She roamed around her site and saw the flowers in one corner. The maids said that they were given by the noble ladies who wished for her fast recovery. She did not expect it since she never had any friends since then. Suddenly, the Duke arrived and checked her temperature using his hand. He acted like he was a concerned father to her, which made her think like it was a dream. But after that, the Duke just told her to rest and left immediately. During her sickness, she realized that she received those flowers and letters because of the reputation of his father. No one was purely caring for her. She was not an exception because she could not take care of herself without the wealth and the house of the Duke. Javelian chose to respond to all the letters she received as she decided to plan for herself. First, she wanted to change the impression of the people about her because of the wickedness she did in the past. She also considered studying to help her stop relying on her father. But she just found out studying to be boring. She did not expect that she would try to learn the things she was uninterested in before. However, she needed to encourage herself to study diligently to become independent. That afternoon, she was surprised to see her father in the library, which made her mistakenly greet him, "Good morning." The Duke recognized one of the books she was holding. It was about the territorial management. Seeing his expression made her wonder if her father was criticizing her for studying that kind of reading. She just reasoned that she was just curious about how the duties of her father as a lord worked. When her father urged her to read it, she felt pressured about it. Suddenly her father inquired if she was aware of the 3 elements of a field. She answered accordingly that the 3 stated were the building, land, and order. She also added their purpose to protect the Lord and to produce for him. The Duke commended her knowledge about it, and she did not expect that her father would interrogate her with a lot of questions about the book she read. They seemed to have a surprisingly long quiz that lasted for an hour. Fortunately, the butler called her father, which saved her from that interrogation because of his guest. She tried to hide the joy of freedom she just had as she avoided the gaze of her father. Before the Duke left, he assigned a book for her to read. What surprised her was the book was about the tactical and military code. It felt like she was drowned in 3 books that were given by her father. While complaining, she noticed the pendant that was in the book. Seems like it was valuable to the Duke, so she went to his room to return it to him. But she did not expect to see her father arguing with a mysterious man. She heard her father calling the man by his name Max. Javelian wondered who the person was and if they were close enough to call each other by their first name. While she was trying to hide herself and recognize the person, Max suddenly looked in her direction. She realized that it was the man she encountered in the armor store. In their conversation, the Duke was trying to make him understand the real essence of swordsmanship, where they should protect, not take away life. But his student just took his words like he was suggesting having a weakness. Her father added that people would be stronger if they were protecting someone, but Max refused to listen as he tried to excuse himself to leave. Hearing his statement sounded rude to the daughter of the Duke, just because he did not have to protect anyone. Before he could leave, Duke Pleon added that someday, he would have someone whom he would treat preciously, and whom he wanted to protect. Hearing her father stating those words made her wonder if he had that someone in his life. Even though he failed as a father who left his only daughter for her to perish. No matter how good his words were, Max was more concerned about terminating the hidden rat he saw. Because of that, Javelian started panicking because she was afraid of the rats. But the Duke stopped him and warned him, for he knew he was referring to his daughter, who was hiding behind the wall. Due to her fear of rats, the lady immediately ran away from them, as she decided to return the pendant at some other time. Max reasoned that it was too dark to make him difficult to recognize that it was the daughter of the Duke. From there, he knew that she was the weakness of his teacher. It's been a decade since the Duke taught him swordsmanship. Aside from wielding a sword, he also learned how strict and blunt the Duke is. But seeing him relaxed upon talking about his daughter, Javelian, it seemed like he was tying rope onto himself. Because of that, he swore that he would never be like his teacher who had a weakness. When the late Empress was barely fighting for her life due to her disease, she pleaded to Lord Regis to help her son survive in this life and be trained by him. He had known that child since he lost favor from the king. His mother eventually did not survive her illness, and she only had a shabby funeral. Because of what happened to his mother, he developed this hatred in his heart. Duke Ploen understood the anger he had because he once became like little Max. But because of his daughter, he was not even aware of how wicked he could be. Just like him, he knew Max would have someone who could be his everything. In the room of the lady, she immediately told the maid about the rat she heard. She worried that though she mistakenly thought little rats existed in their household would breed and multiply, so she wanted to get rid of them as soon as possible. On the other hand, the Duke heard from their butler about it. He reported that Lady Javelian ordered some servants to catch the mice, but they had not caught any of them yet. The Duke understood that his daughter misunderstood what Max said, so he ordered him to stop their servants from catching any. Duke Ploen then inquired about the progress of the list for her daughter. He answered that he was still in the process of looking for families who were suitable to the standard of the lady, which they expected to be complete on that day. After that, he informed the Duke that Mikhail sent them a letter. According to the butler, the letter contains that Mikhail sees the action of Lady Javelian as a strategy to attract his attention. Because of that, the Duke exclusively ordered him to not let any single letter from the Marquis reach his daughter. He wanted him to burn anything from him once he saw one from Mikhail. At the garden, the day had become pleasant when the maids reported to the lady that they had caught one mouse. It seemed like it just came to their household by accident since they could not find other ones. It was a news that brought relief to Javelian. She could finally enter the house at ease since she had been staying at the garden because of it. Afterward, the maid handed her the letter from Count Arlo. When she opened it, it contained an invitation for the 17th birthday party of their youngest daughter, Rose Marie Arlo. In the original story, she remembered that it was the lady who betrayed her by becoming friends with the Grand Duchess. But things had already changed now since they did not have any grudges against each other. She had been taking care of everything to avoid the tragic events in the original novel. To make a response, she ordered her maids to pick a flower from their garden and a pleasant lace. She could use them to decorate her letter for the birthday celebrant. When Lady Rosemarie received her response, she felt delighted knowing that it was personally made by the lady she admired. Priorly, at the banquet they both attended, when she approached her, Lady Javelian just completely ignored her as she straightforwardly went with Mikhail. But now that she sent her a decorated letter as her response in accepting her invitation, she was beyond grateful, and she was willing to forget their first encounter. Lady Rosemarie decided to write a reply to her, and she was fascinated by how she cutely mimicked her way of decorating a letter. However, the lady wrote a very long paragraph, which took 10 pages of paragraph, like it was her way of expressing how happy she was because of her letter. At the social circle, the noble women received letters from Lady Ploen. They thought that the lady seemed to have finally matured. However, one of them doubted the changes in her when she reminded them of the wickedness she had done to them before. Lady Rose defended the lady they knew for being snobbish as she shared with them how Javelian accepted her invitation. They were surprised to hear that when that lady did not usually attend the banquet unless it was a royal one. For the noble ladies at the table, it seemed that the daughter of Count Arlo was just daydreaming about it. Marquis Mikhail overheard the topic of the ladies. He heard that Javelian would be attending the banquet of the daughter of the Count. So, he ordered his butler to inform Count Arlo that he would come to the party. He also inquired if he had received any letter, but unfortunately, nothing came for him. It seemed like Lady Javelian had been completely ignoring his letter. Due to his enraged, he threw his cup of tea as he swore that he would make her regret dumping his message. Javelian decided to personally choose a gift for the daughter of Count Arlo. But when she decided to go to the market, her father sent 12 knights to accompany her. She could not refuse it unless she did not want to go out anymore. She only wanted to go shopping, but because of the battalion behind her, they attracted too much attention. Sir Jalorden inquired if she certainly wanted to go into that place, since the doors seemed closed. He addressed the lady casually, so Javelian scolded him to speak with formalities, even though they were cousins since many people were watching them. Among the shops in there, the lady entered the ruined store, even though it was just next to the extravagant workshop. Inside the gloomy store, it seemed like there was nothing they could buy from that shop as a gift for a noble lady. Furthermore, the shop owner was not in the state to work, so he suggested they go to the next shop instead. Jalorden wanted to listen to the owner, but the lady remained in the shop of Ian Fedor. The owner was surprised to see the lady before her, and declared that she wanted to commission him. Of all the elegant workshops in the market, he wondered why a lady would choose someone like him. Javelian believes that he is the only one capable of doing the item that she wants. But the man doubted himself, as he reasoned that he was currently not in a good condition to create something. But the lady still insisted that she knew he could produce magnificent creations better than anyone else. In the original novel, the man before her, Ian Fedor, was meant to become the best craftsman in the empire. Although he was currently facing a crisis in their family business, in the next 6 months he would be recognized for his talent. He will be hailed as the best craftsman after he produced the most important treasure, which is the necklace for the coming-of-age ceremony of the princess. Before his worth increases, it would be a good idea to establish a connection with him first. After showing her faith in his talent, she finally convinced Ian Fedor to create an item for her. Meanwhile, at the office of the Duke, he received the document where the list of the candidates for his daughter indicated. While looking through the names, he saw the name of the Crown Prince. He immediately ordered Derek to remove that name. Suddenly, a man entered the office of the Duke to inform him that he was being called by the Emperor to the palace immediately. After the transaction that she made in the shop, Javelian decided to buy something for herself. She went to another shop to look for something to purchase. When she saw an accessory that was decorated in blue crystal, she thought that it was suitable for her father. She decided to purchase it upon deciding to give it along with the pendant she saw in the library. As she paid at the counter, a male customer came and approached the lady. Javelian recognized him as a cousin of Mikhail. He was Radian Droyle, known for having a venomous mouth due to being notorious for spreading rumors in society. She addressed the man with a formality that made him question about it. Radian brought up the topic of how it saddened him to hear about her recent breakup with his cousin. He even suggested the lady call him by his first name instead as he kissed the back of her hand. After that, Javelian immediately excused herself and got the accessory she purchased. The venomous-mouthed man saw that cuff buttons for a man, and he thought maliciously about it. It made him wonder what his cousin, Mikhail, would say if he heard about that news when they had just recently ended their relationship. At the Imperial Palace, Duke Ploin went there as soon as he heard that he was being called by the Emperor. His Majesty wanted him to terminate the mastermind behind the assassination of the king, as he compared them to a mouse. As the trusted person of the Emperor, he obeyed his orders. Furthermore, the Emperor added that the mouse they caught immediately took his life, without leaving any evidence to resolve this crisis. Because of that, he was expecting the Duke to stay in the palace for a few more days and lead the interior investigation regarding this case. After that meeting, the comrades of Duke Ploin were complaining about how he did not refuse the order of His Majesty. Since the assassins did not leave any clues, this would result in a long investigation because of having no lead. It was dangerous to speak against the Emperor inside the Imperial Palace, so the Duke prohibited them from saying anything that came through their emotions. While they were talking, they did not know that the Crown Prince was watching over them. He was hiding in the branch of a tree. His disappointment to his teacher increased, as he noticed how the Duke let himself be controlled by the Emperor because of his weakness. Meanwhile, the knight he ordered to lead the operation of escorting her daughter came and reported how they successfully did their job. He even reported how happy the lady was after receiving the birthday invitation from a noble lady, which led her to go shopping for it. All along, Max thought that they were the same in terminating everything that would hinder their path. But because of her daughter, his weakness was revealed to the Emperor, and used that to keep the Duke obeying his orders. He remembered how his teacher said to him that a person will become stronger to protect his weakness, which he personally believed was a foolish remark. Because of that, he became curious about the person who was making the Duke vulnerable, and he decided to find out by himself. At the house of Marquis Mikhail, his cousin Radian visited him. He had been so loud as he asked for tea, but the Marquis wanted him to say what he came there for immediately. The venomous-mouthed cousin just complained about his cold attitude, which he assumed must probably be the reason why Lady Ploin dumped him and found another man. That information completely caught the attention of Mikhail, so his cousin added that he had seen the lady purchase cuff buttons as a gift. It was an item that was intended to give to a valuable man, which symbolized the possession of each other between the lovers. Radian thought it was good news to clarify if the lady was authentically breaking up with him. He thought that their conversation would extend longer because of it, so he asked the servant of the house to serve him tea. But Mikhail suddenly wanted him to leave. Before leaving, he insincerely apologized for worsening his mood. Because of that information from his cousin, who was notorious for spreading rumors, he believed that Javelian had deceived him. He became mad as he remembered her acting so in love with him in the past. But now, according to Radian, she already found another man to replace him. In so much frustration, he lost his temper and destroyed anything he could reach while swearing to make her ex-lover pay for what she did. At the residence of Pleon, Javelian was waiting for her father to arrive. Unfortunately, due to his job, the Duke was not able to return home for a few days. That means she could not return the pendant and give the cuff button to her father for another day. While Javelian was sleeping peacefully in her room, she did not notice that the Crown Prince sneaked into her room. As he observed the lady, she appeared extremely vulnerable, as if she may suddenly disappear from the world. He wondered what was so precious about her when seemed to be insignificant. Later on, Max did not expect that she would be promptly awakened. Instead of getting frightened because an intruder strangely came to her room, she just told to him that he must mistakenly go to the residence of Duke Ploin. She then murmured words about the end of her existence, which would happen a year from now. Suddenly, Javelian lit a match to see the person in front of her clearly. Because of that, she found out that it was the disciple of his father. Max was surprised to meet again the lady he encountered in an armor shop. It was a relief to know that it was him instead of an assassin. It honestly creeped the hell out of her when she saw a black figure watching over her when she was just half awakened. She thought that it was a demon and she was having sleep paralysis. But when she pinched her chin, she realized that she was not dreaming. She was frightened to realize that it must be a bad person, a thief or worse, an assassin. All she could do was blame her reckless decision of living a vicious life to encounter such people to get back to her. She should have endured the fear continuously. However, she suddenly remembered that the story of her life was not meant to end that way in her room. So, she encouraged herself to be brave and say that the intruder went to the wrong place. Because of that, she found out that he was not a bad person. However, how she first saw the person scared her, so she learned her lesson of properly locking everything before she proceeded to sleep. Suddenly, the man before her informally called her attention, which resulted in the lady scolding him to follow proper etiquette, even if he was an ally of her father. Max is someone she could not just make him obey, as he refused to do as she said. Suddenly, someone from the outside of the room asked about the condition of the lady, but before she could move, the strange man suddenly brought out a sword and placed it on her neck. The intruder turned the lady into his hostage, using his sword, when they heard people behind her door. Javelian understood that he wanted her to act like there was nothing wrong. So, she reasoned that she was having difficulty sleeping, and she was thinking of reading a book instead. She had successfully convinced the knights to believe her and left her door. After that, she asked him to get the sword away from her, but Max did not understand her. Javelian added that she did not know why he was the one who had the urge to get angry when he was the one who trespassed in her room. In this kind of terrible situation, Max was surprised that she could just yawn at her. When he removed the sword from her neck, the lady convinced him to go back to his own house because she was still sleepy. But the man claimed that he did not have a home, which made him look pitiful in her sight. She wondered if he was a real mercenary who usually spent his nights in a rental room. As she thought further, she assumed that he might come to his father because he had no place to go aside from the Duke. How she saw him talk with his father when he did not receive a formal greeting or a service from the servants added to her realization that he was not an official guest. So, she thought that he just come to her room by accident when he was trying to find an entrance aside from the front door. Out of pity, and she had no other choice, she decided to offer her room for him to stay a while because her father would not be home for a couple of days. On behalf of her father, she thought that it was her responsibility to take care of the guest of the Duke. Max was surprised by her careless decision as she handed him the stuff he needed to sleep. After she urged him to make himself comfortable and sleep, Javelian immediately fell asleep again. While the lady was sleeping, he wondered why she was not afraid of him. Normally, he could make the people either tremble in fear or hide their fear in front of him. But he could not see any glimpse of fear from this lady, as he remembered how she just bravely glanced into him. Before he got fully distracted by his thoughts about the lady, he tried to focus on his objective to go there. He must terminate the weakness of the Duke, so he could help him out from the grip of the Emperor. After that, they could join forces to take down the Emperor. It was only an inch away where he could seize tightly on her neck. But for a particular reason, his hand froze when she remembered her calling him the disciple of his father. As the lady slept peacefully, he started to feel drowsy. No matter how hard he tried to stop himself from falling asleep in her room, he could not resist it anymore when he decided to lie down beside her and fall asleep. On the next day, Lady Javelian woke up from a dream where people were running away from a dragon. She got hurt upon escaping when suddenly, the Duke stood before her to protect his daughter. It was her first time to dream about a dragon, which was considered to be a good sign. Because of that, she felt like she would be having a good day. When she turned her side to her bed, she was surprised to see the man sleeping beside her. Instead of reacting hysterically, she sat beside him while waiting for him to wake up. Since nothing happened between them, she just thought that the man only wanted to sleep in her bed. While he was sleeping, she was just staring at him. He might be a bad guy, but she could not deny he definitely has the look better than Mikhail. Suddenly, she thought that she might be arrested and be in a great rumor after abducting such a handsome man. This could be a huge misunderstanding, so she chose to wake him up. But when she was about to wake him up, the man suddenly moved, which led them from falling off her bed. Max questioned what she was planning to do as he cornered the lady under him. When Javelian revealed that he had a good sleep in her bed, he was surprised and hardly denied that it happened. Because of the way he reacted, she could not believe that he would just respond that way after she offered her room for him to stay despite being an intruder. But suddenly, she started laughing when she remembered in him the black stray cat she frequently met when she was little. That cat used to come to her room whenever he wanted and slept on her bed. He was indifferent and had a sour attitude until the end, just like the man before her. While laughing hard, someone from the outside asked if she was awake already. Because of that, she became alert and immediately thought of a way to hide a strange man in her room. Suddenly, she dragged her into her closet. To keep themselves from creating weird misunderstandings from the people, Max had to hide himself there. Max did not understand the weird misunderstanding she was referring to, so she tried to explain that people might think differently once they found out that they slept together. To make him understand their situation, she used the mating animals as an example, which they could be falsely accused of doing. After hearing that, the man reacted soundly due to that rubbish thought. The lady suddenly covered his mouth to prevent him from making any noises because his loudness might lead them to be caught and be a reason for massive misunderstanding. When the maid heard a strange sound from the lady's room, she tried to open her door, but she did not expect that it was locked. Meanwhile, Javelian convinced her father's student to hide quietly inside her closet to save themselves from misinterpretation. Good thing the man agreed to her, and because of that she patted his head. But in the back of his mind, how she dared to touch his head was inappropriate. They heard the maid calling the lady once again, so she closed the closet and responded that she was about to come. As the maid entered her room, she expressed how worried she was after hearing something inside while her door was locked, which she never did before. Javelian assured her that nothing serious had happened to her, and she apologized for making the servant worried. Javelian reasoned that she locked her door because she was afraid that someone might barge inside her room. She could not even look straight at the maid while explaining. For the servant, no one would ever dare to do that in the house Ploen when even the thieves would choose to avoid that place. The lady doubted it since there was already someone hiding in her closet. The daughter of the Duke just expressed how uncertain she was about her claims since her father was not in the house at that moment. After hearing it, the servant thought that she was anxious because of the absence of Duke Regis. She immediately grabbed the hand of the lady to assure her that her father would return safely soon. So, she suggested to go out and get some fresh air instead of worrying. While holding her hand, she was astounded when she noticed the hand mark on her wrist. On the other hand, the crown prince was getting impatient for taking so much time inside the closet. He wondered how long he had to waste his precious time there. No matter how much he thought about that strange woman, he could never exactly figure out why she just laughed at him when she was supposed to be terrified. It's been 20 minutes since he heard the voice of the lady. She was moaning and directing the maid to get a little lower. Due to this, the prince mistakenly thought that they were engaging in mating behavior. However, upon hearing the helper advise her to consult a physician rather than applying a topical medication, he initially believed that the woman was merely pretending to be injured even if she was well. He heard the worry of the maid again when she saw the bruises on her wrist and shoulder. The lady just simply reasoned that it was because she carelessly fell off the bed. Upon hearing it, the prince then recalled the scenario in which he was above her and realized that she must have been injured when they fell together. Later on, the servant left to give Javilian some more time to rest. He felt her presence in front of the closet after that. As the door opened, he saw the most beautiful woman in the town, urging him to come out. Javilian assumed that he must be hungry already, so she wanted to eat with him. He inquired why she wanted so. The lady just answered that the food would taste better if she ate with someone. When the man was not saying anything, she pulled her out while bragging about how good their head chef was. The prince had no choice but to join the lady on her breakfast, but he did not expect that they would serve him a cucumber sandwich. He could barely eat it because he did not like that food. Javilian noticed that he was not eating, so she asked him why. The man just stated that he would take it, but in the back of his mind, he was questioning if he was really required to do it when all he only planned was to terminate the weakness of his teacher and escape. Even though nobody was intentionally forcing him, he still ate the food he hated the most. The lady before her was waiting for his reaction as she was hoping that he would like it. After tasting it, the man just nods, which brought relief to Javilian because she worried that he might not like it. From there, the prince realized that the cucumber seemed to be fine as he took more bites. At the palace of the Ashit Empire, there was an old man heading to the throne of His Majesty while thinking about the rumors of Duke Ploen, who was assigned to guard the emperor. On his way, the knights blocked him. When he stated that he came to see the emperor, they allowed him to enter. He thought that if things continued the way it is, his subjects would be even more discontent just like before. Duke Ilias finally faced His Majesty as he knelt, and immediately inquired about his decision to keep Duke Ploen as his guard. The emperor responded like he was the only eligible person that he can entrust this task. 20 years ago, there was a battle between the Ashit Empire and the Taziria Kingdom. The young emperor, who knew nothing about the matters of the world, abandoned the royal palace to save himself. He was too cowardly to only think about his own protection as he commanded everyone to save him. Fortunately, there was a regular palace knight stepped up to protect the empire. The war hero who helped a coward to victory was Regis Adri Ploen, who was now living his life as a duke. Because Regis voiced his support for the emperor, talks about dethroning him stopped, but the subjects still think of His Majesty as a coward. Duke Ilias stated that the resentment towards the emperor would only increase if they held on to the useless commands of Duke Ploen. So, he suggested to lay down a trap to find out the mastermind behind the assassination. But the emperor just rejected his idea, claiming that he knew very well how to handle everything by himself. Before the duke left, he reminded him first about the decision he must make, since his ill repute from his past actions still holds a great influence where his current grandeur was overshadowed. Upon seeing him leaving, the emperor was infuriated about his audacity to give him advice when he knew nothing at all. In his mind, he swore that the person who had resentment towards him would never be able to rebel against him. Meanwhile, at the Ploen's estate, Javilian felt sleepy while reading a book. It must be because she just finished her meal. When she looked at her couch, she saw the man lying comfortably on it. While looking at him, she was startled when he suddenly asked her what she was looking at. She realized that he was not sleeping, so she just stated that he seemed to be comfortable on her couch, but the man just denied it. Her gaze never left him as she pondered how long he planned to stay in her room. Because of that, Max inquired again about why she kept staring at him. Javilian answered that he seemed quite close to her father. She remembered the warm-hearted expression that Duke Regis had ever shown her. He was very different from how he treated her before, to the point that she thought he was someone else. As she remembered her father, she also remembered the items that she had to give to him. Since the man before her was she believed as the disciple of her father, she called his attention. She expected him to know about the likes of his master. While thinking about the things she must inquire to him, Max was getting impatient for making him wait for whatever she would ever say. To not make it long, Javilian asked him about his opinion on giving cufflinks as a gift. After saying that, she just pretended that she was reading a book while waiting for his answer. The man was stunned when he heard it from her, which made him silent for so long. The lady wondered why he was not saying anything, but his action made her surprise. Max suddenly removed the book she was reading and asked to whom she planned to give that gift to. Javilian wondered the reason for his rush just to ask her about it. To her response, she only wondered if there was any other person who could be the receiver of her gift. Max recalled that the investigator reported to him about her intense love for Mikhail, to the extent that she would follow him around regardless of how it would affect her reputation. Because of that, he wondered if this lady was still intending to hang on to that man again. If that's the case, then she looked pathetic in his sight. The prince scolded her with the thought that she would give a gift to a man who was not interested in her. Javilian felt offended when she heard his harsh words. Max intentionally said it out of concern he has for her, but having the thought that she was defending that man made him irritated as he claimed that she must be a prideless woman. He was halted when he saw her unpleasing reaction. Because of that, Javelian encouraged herself to reveal that she only wanted to give a gift to her father in order to live longer. He was surprised and relieved to think that he was wrong. It made clear to the prince that her gift was not meant to Mikhail, which made him smirked. Javelian was insulted when she saw his reaction. With so much irritation, she told him to stop laughing. Max then asked her about the cufflinks she would give as a present. He simply concluded that it did not fit a swordsman like Duke Ploen after the lady presented them to him. Even though his comments only infuriated her further, she felt as though she could rely on him because he obviously had a great sense of gift-giving. According to Max, he just recently gave his father a gift. Once there was anyone found out about what he did, no one would ever think that it was a good present. Because his father seemed to be bored lately, he made him worried about his life, which resulted in the investigation of the failed assassination. It was something that he should not carelessly brag about, so when Javelian asked him about it, he chose not to reveal it. He just stated that Duke Ploen would be happy with anything that comes from her daughter, but it seemed that the lady was not believing his words as she just passed by to him. If only this had become easy, she would never have to ask him. Since she already bought the cufflinks, she decided to give it whether he would like it or not. His gaze followed her as he wondered if she was not aware of the sacrifices of the Duke for her. If his teacher was hiding it purposely, then it must be a pathetic decision. Meanwhile, in the backyard of the palace, Duke Ploen was resting on the branch of the tree. He was awakened when he felt a bird landed on him. He remembered that her daughter was afraid of the small animals, so he was urging the bird to fly away. Later on, a knight came searching for the Duke. He called his attention as he anticipated that there was something he would tell. When the knight told him that there was some news from their estate regarding his daughter, Javelian, he suddenly jumped off the tree and urged him to tell the news right away. The knight was startled and assured him that there was nothing happened to the lady. However, she turned to be anxious because of the absence of her father. Duke Ploen was surprised to know that his child was looking for him, which was very unusual since she had never said anything like that. But as he processed the idea, he could not help but smile upon the idea that his daughter was longing for his presence. The knight added that the lady must be feeling depressed since she never came out of her room. From that moment, he decided to stop the boring act he was doing for the crown prince and went to the emperor immediately. At the residence of the Ploen family, Javelian was busy scribbling a message for her father. But the man behind her was like a bug as he kept on bothering her that giving a gift would already be enough for the Duke and there was no need for adding a letter. But the lady did not listen to him. She crumpled a used paper again because she could not figure out the words she must exactly say to her father since they were not close to each other. While hoping that she could gain an idea from Max, she inquired about the thing he talked about the Duke regularly. The prince remembered how his teacher constantly bragged about his daughter. He could share about it with her, but he just stated that they don't talk very often. Javelian realized that he would never contribute anything, so she decided to do it all by herself. It took her an hour to construct a less awkward letter for his father. Max became curious about the content of her message, so he read it while he was behind her. He was surprised that she had just entirely written an apology letter, which made him inquire if her decision was final to give it to the Duke. She seemed to be determined about it. Before Javelian left her room, she reminded him about things he must do if someone came and assured him that she would return safely. Since he could not stop her, Max just wondered what his teacher's reaction would be once he received it all from his daughter. At the drawing room of the Ashet Empire, Duke Ploen faced the emperor. It had been 4 days since he gave him an order to find the assassin, yet there was still no information about it. His Highness was infuriated that there was no progress in the investigation. He stated to him once again that he should find the cursed mouse bastard. It was obvious that he was not aware that he was referring to his son. From the beginning, he knew that the assassination attempt of the emperor was done by Max. He probably wanted to create a conflict between him and his father. He remembered that his student had asked him if he was afraid of the cowardly emperor. Honestly, it doesn't seem like he was terrified of him from the way he followed his instructions. But it was not the perfect time yet to stand against the emperor, which is why he was not doing so. With so much certainty, Duke Regis proclaimed that the assassin would no longer attack him. When the emperor enragedly inquired about it, he explained that throughout his patrol in the imperial palace, he noticed that their perimeter was strong in order to secure his protection. His Highness was not convinced as he sensed that he was just speaking well so he could persuade him to go back to his home. To make him stay longer, he stated that he was still worried. So, Duke Regis claimed that he could extend his stay for only a day. The emperor suddenly recalled what Duke Ilias had said to him when he came to the palace a few days ago. He declared that he needed to summon the crown prince back if he was going to challenge the man in front of him. The emperor thought that his statements were useful, so he decided to put another leash on the competent duke. In order to do that, he would pretend that he was about to pass the crown to his son, Prince Maximilian. Since her father was a workaholic person, Javelian assumed that he would likely go to his office first at the Ploen mansion. She decided to go there, and as she walked in, she was taken aback by how large the office was. Since she knew that she could not afford to lend her gift to the Duke personally, she was grateful for his absence at the moment. Her plan was to just place it all on his desk and leave quickly. But what made her stay there was when she saw a list of the candidates' names. Among them all, the name of the Crown Prince was the only encircled one, which made her drop her gift as she wondered if her father was planning to arrange her marriage to Maximilian Kazan Ashet, the man who was feared by her character in the original novel. Juvelian recalled when the Duke inquired about her ideal type. She made it very clear that she would not tie the knot with someone who lacked the characteristics of a noble and honorable man. Her father must have thought the Crown Prince was a good fit for her because of the particular qualities she mentioned back then. The Crown Prince of the Empire, Maximilian Kazan Ashet, had to be a man of competence, honor, and family name. However, he was notoriously famous for ruthlessly taking away the lives of the people. Furthermore, as the story progressed, he would be the one to harm his father in order to achieve his desired position. As the antagonist of all villains in the original book, he was a heartless, emotionless psychopath who even meant to torment her poor character. For someone like him, what sort of father could afford to put his daughter at risk? Clearly, his intention was to marry her off to a member of the royal family. Meanwhile, in her room, Max was just silently waiting for her return. As the time took longer, he suddenly sensed someone entering from the window. He alertly attacked that person, but he found out that it was his loyal person. For her to sneak into another house for the prince, she must have some important news to deliver. She begged the Crown Prince to release him so that she could tell him about everything. Under the direction of their madame, she was sent to tell him that the emperor might come to this place. When Max released her, she continued her report as she stated that His Highness had been acting suspiciously lately. The Crown Prince expected it because of what he did, but he did not know there was something more reason. According to the messenger, she had heard that due to the popular demand, the Prime Minister and the minor officials were hastening the return of the Crown Prince. This must be the time for Prince Maximilian to return to the palace. On the other hand, Juvelian decided to head back to her room while carrying the gift she was supposed to leave on her father's table. She kept on thinking about the thing she had just recently discovered. The thing she had only recently discovered continued to cross her mind. Despite her strong opposition to the thought of being sold off to a tyrant man, she found it difficult to defeat her rival due to his royal status. Moreover, withdrawing without a valid reason would be difficult. For the time being, changing his father's mind was the greatest thing she could do. She must come up with an indisputable explanation for why she could not wed the Crown Prince. She must do everything in order to save her life from this. But for now, she needs to keep her awareness about the list of candidates a secret. When she reached her room, she was surprised to see that nobody was there. She wondered if he just hid because a maid had come, but when she searched for him, she only found a note on her desk. The man wrote him a letter before he left, saying that he would return when the time came. She might not request him to come back, but when she roamed her sight in her room, she just found the place strangely silent. From that moment, she wished that he should at least say goodbye before he left. While riding his horse head back to the palace, Prince Maximilian wondered if the lady had already read his note. Even to himself, he could not understand why he had to do it for her. For the overnight that he spent in her room, it felt like he just had a natural stay in that place. From the hill, he could see the peaceful night of the House Ploen. When the messenger noticed that he was just staring at that mansion, the prince immediately made his horse run and took the fastest route to reach the imperial palace. The next morning, Juvelian woke up late. She wondered why the disciple of his father had not awakened her, but later on, she realized that the man was no longer there when she saw the note again. She started to worry about if he had already found somewhere else to stay, but then she questioned why she should be thinking about other people when her personal problem that was about to come was more urgent. Since she thought about everything until she fell asleep last night, she figured out that at this rate, she wouldn't be able to think of any plans. When she saw the things she must give to her father on her table, she imagined how the Duke would question why she possessed the pendant. Many days had already passed, but she was still yet to return it. The number of challenges that she must face was already increasing day by day. Servants saw her, and they noticed the changes she had since her father left this mansion. It was strange that she woke up late and she just kept staring out the window constantly like she was deeply pondering about something. From the servant's perspective, she looked so depressed. Marilyn, one of the servants, went to her and mentioned how nice the weather was. She suggested going for a walk outside and feeling the warm sunlight which would help her spirit to lift. Juvelian tried to consider it after realizing that she had been feeling stuffy because she had not gone outside for a long time. When the servant heard that, she suddenly remembered how the lady used to be rebellious and harsh when she was just a kid. She used to hate the house because of being alone, and her father had frequently been away. Out of empathy, it made the servant cry, which made Juvelian wonder why she was reacting like that. Suddenly, the lady was taken aback when the servant embraced her and emotionally promised that she would stay by her side forever. That afternoon, Juvelian had her snacks in their garden. The maid served all her favorite desserts. When she noticed that the strawberry cake of the lady was missing, she instantly left to prepare it. Now that she was alone again, her problems crossed her mind again. Among them, she mentally arranged that she had to take care of the pendant and the blind dates first. She must have devised a plan ahead of time before the other problems would arise. While thinking about the plan, she suddenly heard the voice of her father from behind. She immediately stood in great shock because she did not expect him to come back early, since their butler once informed her that the Duke would take longer before he could return. She was too surprised that she did not know what to do and what to say first. But she was halted when the Duke talked to her. Strangely, he promised that he would never leave her again from that day on. Juvelian did not expect Duke Regis to be like that. He added that he hurried to return home and asked her if she had already eaten dinner. When she answered no, her father advised her to take care of herself whether he was there or not, or else she would faint again. It was a good start to mend their relationship, however. Juvelian thought that the Duke just wanted to make her healthy until she became fit to be sold off for marriage. From now on, he told his daughter not to faint anymore. Later on, he invited her to have their dinner together. Juvelian was stunned when her father held her hand and pulled her. The scene of her being dragged by the Duke to the dungeon while pleading with him to believe her suddenly appeared in her mind. It was far different from the current scene she was facing. But it felt like it was foolish to expect any kindness from him. In fact, she should have followed him around behind his back at all times if she wanted to be loved in the first place. The table was filled with delicious food. It was all too much for just the two of them. Even though they were together in the dining, the silent awkwardness still reigned over them. To start a conversation, the Duke mentioned the party she would be attending next week. Juvelian stated that the daughter of Count Arlo was the one who sent her an invitation for her birthday. When her father inquired about her partner, she worried that he might ask her to choose among the candidates he picked, since she had not chosen anyone yet. She just answered that someone had previously sent a letter asking her to become someone's partner for the ball. Furthermore, all the letters she had received were from the various noblemen. Upon listening to her, the Duke just let her do what she wanted, which gave her relief. Because of that, she ate hurriedly so she could choose someone and write a letter immediately. After dinner, she was surprised by the number of partner requests she received. It seemed like having a lot of choices would be challenging as well, since most of them came from noble families with a high status in society. It took her until late in the evening when she finished writing a letter to the chosen candidate. Since the night was already deep, she ordered Marilyn to deliver her message the next day instead. The maid took the letter with her as she left the room of the lady. But she was startled when she saw the Duke and abruptly asked about his daughter. Seeing the envelope she was holding, he figured out that Juvelian had already decided on who she would attend the party with. Marilyn informed him that the lady had selected the son of Count Loans named Edmund. Duke Regis inquired about the reputation of that man, so the servant shared that he was famous for having a handsome face. For her, he would be a perfect match for the daughter of the Duke. She even closed her eyes as she imagined them together, but when she took a look, her master suddenly vanished throughout the hallway. Regardless of the deepness of the night, Duke Regis went to the house of Loans to meet their son, who sent a proposal request to Juvelian. Edmund inquired why the Duke visited him at that late hour, though he did not get a response. The Duke just stared at him like he was inspecting his soul. From that moment, he recalled the attributes that his daughter mentioned when he asked about her ideal man. However, it appeared that the man in front of him did not match her qualifications. The next day, the piece that Juvelian commissioned from the Fedor workshop had already been delivered. It was a relief that she received it, since the birthday of the celebrant was soon to come. On the top of the box, she saw a note from Ian Fedor claiming her as his muse. Moreover, when she opened it, she did not expect to see another item when she could not recall that the shop had a promo of buy one, get one back then. The servants saw the item and they were all captivated to see how glamorous they were. She then closed the box and told them that she would explain the function of it later. After a while, the butler knocked on her door and informed her that the second son of Count Loans visited her as his way of responding to her letter. It was an unexpected visit, however. Juvelian thought that it would be better to get to know each other first if they were meant to become a partner in a ball. She responded that he would come down once she was already prepared. Afterward, the lady then showed herself presentably to the man waiting for her. Edmund was in awe of her beauty when he saw her. Later on, Marilyn escorted them to the drawing room. As they proceeded, she was silently comparing him to Mikhail as well as to the disciple of his father. Despite the rudeness he showed on their first met, she could not deny that he also possessed an unexceptional face. As she thought about him, she could not help but worry about how his life went after he disappeared. Suddenly, she was brought back to her senses when Edmund called her name. It looked like her mind zoned out in the middle of their conversation. All along, she thought that they would get to know each other. But she was surprised when the man knelt and sincerely apologized because he already accepted someone's request after he mistakenly thought that Lady Juvelian had another partner already. He even added how surprised he was to receive her response when there was speculation circulating around the society that she was already dating someone. Juvelian was in great shock to hear that a woman who barely left the house like her had been involved in such a rumor like that. She wondered if there was someone who saw the disciple of his father through her window to create such gossip about her. Juvelian cleared her name that she had been staying at home and she could prove it. Because of that, Edmund apologized for letting himself believe in it. The lady had forgiven him, and thanks to him, she found out the allegations about her. Once she found out the person behind the spread of false information about her, she swore to make them pay for it. Suddenly, she was shocked to see Edmund standing there, praising her for being so nice to be able to forgive him so quickly. He would undoubtedly hold her to the very end if only he lived up to her standards. The woman became confused when she heard him talk about the standard. However, he went on to say that he hoped to have a meal with her someday. Unfortunately, he made the quick decision to depart when he noticed the Duke glaring at him through the glass door. Meanwhile, at the Salon Blooms, some guests went there while covering their faces with their masks. 3 noble ladies were talking about the expectation of everyone for Count Arlo's decoration of the event this time since last year. They did a flamboyant with roses. But aside from the interior designs, one of the main reasons why many people will attend the banquet was because they were all looking forward to the presence of Lady Ploen, as well as the man he would bring as her partner after her breakup with Marquis Mikhail. Their conversation went on about the rumor that she was already dating someone. They made fun of him as they wondered about the potential guy she would date. Little did they know, there was someone from the hall who caught their attention when they began conversing about the troublemaker lady they knew. Unfortunately, he disliked the way they talked about her as he scattered his glass of wine near them. They were startled, and the scene created a silent whisper from those who witnessed. The mysterious man defended Javelian from those ladies for saying words without proof. The lady stood and claimed that there must be a witness to that news, but the man just questioned her if she even saw it with her own eyes. She claimed that she did not see it for herself. However, this kind of rumor about her would never spread if only she had become a good person. Because of that, he challenged her to tell it directly to Lady Ploen. But nobody dared to reply against him after that, as they turned their head to avoid his gaze. In so much frustration, he crushed the glass more as he stepped on it. For some reason, he wondered where this feeling of annoyance coming from. To decompress from the scene he made a while ago, he met with Madame Frisia, the owner of the Salon Blooms. The woman greeted him since it had been long since the Crown Prince visited. However, the first thing he did was to express his irritation. He was only hoping never go to there again after experiencing the terrible standard in that place. As a result, Madame Frisia questioned the prince about his dissatisfaction with Lady Ploen's information. Hearing how she called the accusation about her as just merely information made him taunted about it. The madame, who seemed used to these societal issues, advised him that the guild would fail quickly if he had no sense of reality. For a long time she had known the prince. She wondered why he became upset easily when he used to hide his emotions expertly. Moreover, he was someone who did not even converse with nobles, but Prince Maximilian just reasoned that he only did that to stop them from talking that way loudly like a dog. Madame Frisia just teased him for the changes he made right since he came from Duke Ploen. After that, the crown prince urged the woman to tell further information about the rumor about Javelian. So, the madame revealed firstly that news of her having a secret lover was nothing but an entire lie, because if she had, she would not send a letter to Count Loewens asking him to become her partner for the banquet. Hearing that made Max frown even more. The owner of the salon explained that since he was already courteous and gorgeous, there was no question the woman would extend an invitation to him. However, according to the rumors, he was a famous playboy who used to make a lot of women cry. It made sense when Max remembered that his teacher once mentioned that the type of his daughter was a handsome man. If that was the case, the prince just doubted what she had seen in the count to invite him. Madame Frisia added that she also heard that the count refused her request. But hearing it made the prince more infuriated, which made the owner of the salon laugh at his reaction. Lastly, she revealed that Sir Droyle, the cousin of Sir Mikhail, was the source of the rumor that Lady Ploen was having an affair with an unidentified man. What was more interesting was the Marquis just merely kept watching his cousin spread false accusations about her ex-girlfriend, despite the fact that it would taint the honor of her ex-girlfriend. Prince Maximilian has already heard enough. Because of that, he ordered Madame Frisia to investigate the weakness of Mikhail and his cousin and send it to him immediately. Furthermore, he wanted her to figure out what kinds of people requested the lady to become her partner. After giving orders, he immediately left. But the madame remembered that Duke Ploen had already bought that information first, and she did not have the chance to tell him. Meanwhile, at the residence of the Ploen family, the daughter and father were having tea together. The comfortable moment with her father was like a knock to the moon. It was impossible. Since the count left, she had been trapped with her father. She was entirely uncomfortable with his presence, even though they were just having a peaceful tea time. Later on, Duke Ploen inquired if she had already chosen a partner for the ball. If she revealed that the count had rejected her, that would be his opportunity to bring up the list of his candidates. So she just answered that she was still thinking about it. Because of that, her father instructed her to inform him if she could not be able to find a partner. Upon hearing that offer, she began to worry about what he would do if she were to inform him. Later on, she decided to excuse herself, but before she could leave, the Duke told her that he would be out for a while due to the important matter that he must resolve. She wondered what issue he was talking about, so her father just told her that he would just give some people a warning. Since he would be out later, she just wished him to return safely, but for some reason she felt like that matter concerned her. As expected, her father left that afternoon. Little did anyone know someone was planning to sneak inside their house. When he confirmed that the Duke finally left, he expertly jumped off to the balcony of the lady's room and entered. As soon as he walked in, he wondered where the lady could have been. He worried that he might go out to find another partner. But then he persuaded himself that it didn't matter if she found someone to date or not. Suddenly, she heard the voice of the lady, asking about his matter in her room. When he looked at her, he saw her earnest expression like she was not even pleased to see him. Max only asked her where she had been. How she was irritated for being asked like that after not seeing each other for a while was evident on her face. But even though she was upset, she just answered that she just went downstairs. Her answer was like a sound of relief which made him smile a little. Later on, she realized that what he stated in the letter was right, he really did come back. The prince just comfortably sat on her couch as she wondered about his reason for coming there when her father was not around. But because she remembered that there were more important problems that she must deal with, she could not help but sigh. Suddenly, she was startled when he closely went to her just to inquire why she was reacting that way. It seemed that he sensed that there was something on her mind that was bothering her. Juvelian revealed that there were some troubling issues with her. Max urged her to share it with him as he promised that he would never reveal it to anyone. The daughter of the Duke wondered whether it was fine to tell him and if it would make her feel better just like the last time. Before anything else, she made him promise to never expose her to Duke Regis, and if he happened to betray her, it would cost 100 bars of gold. To add it up, Max confidently claimed that she could have everything in his possession if he happened to reveal her words to his teacher. Because of that, he made Juvelian laugh because she thought that he was a homeless person who bet all his possessions just to make her tell everything. But Max just found himself blushing while watching her laughter. After that, they faced each other at the table as they started their serious conversation. Julian first revealed that there was a rumor about her spreading around regarding her affair with an unknown man. However, she was not ashamed of having a secret relationship, she didn't care what other people would think of her. But it appears that the men who asked to be her partners have already fled because of the rumors. Hearing it made the crown prince consider those men as fools together with the people who only knew was to spread rumors. Later on, he found himself imagining that he would never be like them if he were in their shoes. But he immediately refused that idea and focused on listening to her. Juvelian admitted that it was not important to her whether she would have a partner or not. It seemed like it was not a problem at all, but what she said next surprised the crown prince. After seeing the list of candidates that her father gathered, she deduced that her father wanted her to marry someone he had already chosen to be her partner. That information made Max furious, and in the back of his mind, he accused him of faking his concern about his daughter. That was her only reason why she wanted to show up with a partner, because if she did not, the Duke would certainly urge her to meet that someone on his list. Max advised her that there would be a suitable partner nearby. As he stated that, Juvelian realized that he was right. The lady touched his hand to thank him as she came to a realization. The prince blushed thinking that she caught his hint of him being her partner even though it would be a bother to him. The lady revealed that she could ask Geraldine instead to be her partner. His imagination suddenly crumbled when he realized that she was not referring to him. With a serious look on his face, he questioned her as to who Geraldine was. Juvelian answered him that he was her knight who always stayed by her side whenever she went out, so she was sure that everyone knew who he was, so everything should be fine. All she needed to do was to tell her father that she was scared of the people who were spreading rumors about her, and the Duke would definitely agree to it. Geraldine was also her cousin on her mother's side, so there shouldn't be rumors about them. After hearing that, Max felt relieved, but a second later, he realized why he felt that way even though it was not his business who her partner was. When he was lost in thoughts, Juvelian suddenly thanked him for hearing her out, which made the prince blush. He then decided to leave because of the feeling that he was not even sure what it was. But before he could, the lady stopped her, which halted him from walking. She gave him a cute pouch that had money on it. Max was so speechless since he had a lot of it but couldn't say it in front of her. It's not free money but a payment for coming there to listen to her. Since the last time he went there, she couldn't give any to him because he left without waiting for her, so this time she felt happy. Before he finally left, she told him to come there whenever he had nowhere to go, which he obediently agreed. Meanwhile, a carriage was about to reach the Floyen Duchy once they crossed the bridge in front of them. But before they could even go over it, a carriage suddenly stopped them. When the man inside asked the chauffeur why they stopped, a voice could be heard beside his carriage asking if he was Ronald Hermann Crocus. The man was surprised to see Duke Floyen personally. He told Ronald that there was no need for him to go to their residence as they could talk there instead. That statement has the same meaning as not approaching his daughter, as he was not enough, which the Duke didn't deny. But the man was more stubborn than he thought, since he insisted on seeing the lady himself to hear those words instead of from the Duke, and he was confident that he would be accepted since he was popular among the ladies. Duke Regis was having a serious thought and remembered that the applicant earlier whom he talked to was easily persuaded when he warned that man named Boromir, but this time it didn't work. While he was lost in thought, Ronald said that Juvelian would definitely choose him. Hearing him saying his daughter's name casually like they were that close already provoked the Duke, which gave chills to Ronald. He tried to explain himself, but the Duke didn't give him the time to do it. He called his whole name, Ronald Hermann Crocus, and asked if he was looking down on his daughter while exuding a powerful aura. Afraid that his life might end immediately, Ronald's carriage suddenly went away while asking for forgiveness. And with that, the Duke's problem was solved. Rowan, Boromir, Crocus, all of them were on the list of potential suitors for his daughter, but he didn't like it all, so he planned to instruct his secretary to make a new one. That night, Jevilian was under a lot of pressure about her plan before talking to her father. She discovered that the rumors about her started because of the cufflinks she bought for her father that were mistakenly understood as a gift for her non-existent lover. She already had the assumption about who spread the rumors, so to solve it, her father just needed to wear those cufflinks everywhere since it was one of a kind. Once they saw it, people knew that the rumors were not true. Before she could execute her plan, she didn't to be on her father's good side, whom she was having tea at the moment. The Duke heard that she wanted to talk to him, so when he asked about it, Jevilian brought the jewel that belonged to his father. He didn't know that she had it while being calm, which Jevilian was not expecting. For the real purpose of that tea time, she took out the cufflinks for his father. That surprised the Duke, as he didn't expect a gift from his precious daughter. Jevilian thought that the blue diamonds suited him, so she bought them while she was out before doing some shopping. Her father was speechless, so she thought his reaction was the normal thing, even though she expected him to get excited, but maybe she was asking for too much. Then the final step of her plan came. She brought up the topic about her partner. The words that came out first in her mouth were that she knew her father was busy. The father didn't even let his daughter finish her sentence because of excitement and interpreted it as his daughter asking her father to be her partner. With a happy face, he told Jevilian that he would attend the party with her. The daughter froze as her whole plan crumbled into pieces while the father was shining brightly because his daughter asked him to be her partner. Meanwhile, at the spire near Salon Blooms, the prince's subordinate was confused as to what could be the reason why their master was in that messed up state. They had no idea that the prince was having problems with a woman, and it was Lady Flo Yen. He was thinking about her every time and even went to her room. He convinced himself that it was all because he pitied her when the lady shared her worries about the rumors circulating about her, so he decided not to go back to her anymore. But a second later, he remembered her saying that he could go back to her room when he had nowhere to go, which pissed him off. The subordinate couldn't take it anymore, so she asked what's gotten into him, but their master instructed her to just start the report. The first report was about Victor, who was acting as his proxy in the Imperial Palace. His message says that the Emperor's men were starting to suspect Victor because of his long absence. That angered the prince because of all times, they suspect Victor now when they didn't bother about him before even he stood in front of them. He ordered her to reply to Victor, instructing him to act more like Max to avoid more suspicions, which the subordinate obeyed. Then the second report caught the prince's attention as it was about Lady Flo Yen. The report says that the nobles were already looking forward to Lady Rose's party, since it would be the first event that Lady Flo Yen would be attending that was not held at the Imperial Palace. The only flaw of the great Duke Flo Yen, and with the rumors going around with the lady about her new secret lover, the nobles couldn't wait to slander her at the upcoming party. Max had heard enough, so he stopped the reporting as he didn't need to hear the rest, even though he instructed that every detail about Lady Flo Yen should be reported. When his subordinate was about to go and deliver the message to Victor, the prince suddenly stopped her and gave her a very important task, so he instructed to give up her weekend off. The day of the party had finally arrived. At Earl Arlo's estate, Madame Frisia was not happy to be there, but the moment people greeted her, she put on her fake smile for the sake of her business. If not for the prince's instruction to keep an eye on Lady Flo Yen and help her out, she was already enjoying her weekend and not working. Madame Frisia knew that Lady Flo Yen caught the prince's attention even though he told her that it was pure business since the lady could be useful to them. The noble ladies were talking nonsense about the tea party, but it was too obvious that they were waiting for the main event that everyone's been waiting for, and Madame Frisia could see it clearly. They were whispering if Lady Flo Yen had already arrived and assumed that her partner would be her rumored secret lover. Now that the nobles started what they predicted, Madame Frisia's role was needed, so she told everyone her opinion. She said that Lady Flo Yen would probably bring Sir Geraldine, her cousin, or go by herself alone to stop more rumors going around with her, since it had not been that long after her breakup with Sir Mikhail. The ladies were easily fooled by her assumption and agreed with Madame Frisia, as she had a point on that one. But one lady commented that if Lady Flo Yen arrived with either of her opinions, the rumors about her would become even more mysterious. The answer to that was to just find out who wore the cufflinks that everyone wanted to know, which the ladies agreed to again. Suddenly, they shifted their topic to Sir Mikhail, whom they praised for his features and gentle manners. They couldn't wait to see the two, Sir Mikhail and Lady Flo Yen, reunited after their recent breakup. And it would be even more entertaining to them if the owner of the cufflinks would show up as well. Meanwhile, the ladies were not aware that Sir Mikhail was in the corner eavesdropping on their conversation. He couldn't contain his anger when he thought about the rumored lover that Lady Flo Yen had. So, of all people, he was the one who was the most interested to know who Jevilian would bring. Inside the Floyens' carriage, the Duke assured his daughter that she had nothing to worry about since he would be there at the party with her if someone tried to do something to her. When they arrived, her father helped her to walk down from the carriage, and the face of a loving father was all over him. Everyone was so surprised to see that the Duke accompanied his daughter instead of the rumored secret lover that they all expecting. Then they officially announced the arrival of the savior and hero of the empire, Duke Regis Adré Floyen, and his esteemed daughter, Lady Jevélien Eloy Floyen. Before they arrived at the party, she remembered the true Jevélien in the novel whom she got reborn into. The lonely villainess, an outcast of high society that nobody likes, got rejected by Mikhail whom she thought loved her truly, and was abandoned by the one who caused her to be like that, her father. That was why her life ended pitifully so in that life. After being reborn as Jevélien of the novel, she had already given up the thought of being loved by her father, and she planned to run away from the man whom she thought her father chose to marry her off to. So by the time she saw the look of a loving father from the Duke, she was curious as to what he was thinking with that face of him. The people were so mesmerized by the Duke's beauty as it was as the rumors say about him. It has been a long time since they last saw him attending a party, but he has not changed at all. Jevélien looked at her father when she heard people talking about him, and there was no doubt that he was the handsome man in the empire, so he was the perfect partner, but she never planned to make him one, so she didn't know what her father was thinking. While Juvel was busy with her thoughts, the Duke suddenly grabbed her on her shoulder to avoid stumbling since she wasn't looking while walking. When he held his daughter's hand, everyone was surprised to see the cufflinks from the rumors. That was when they realized that the lady gifted it to her father, but some were still not convinced, and even made up a story that the Duke made a fake one to stop the rumors going around his daughter's secret lover. Duke Floyen gave them a death stare for trying to make up a dirty story about the precious gift he received from his daughter. In the corner, Sir Mikhail was having his own delusions that Jevélien had not gotten over him since there was no secret lover as the cufflinks were given to the Duke. After entering, Jevélien was amazed at the decoration of the house, so she would definitely remember it as an inspiration when she moved out and decorated her own. While looking around, the Duke noticed her and thought that maybe she was being wary, so he told her to just enjoy herself without worrying anything. He added that he was his daughter so no one would dare to do anything to her, but she mistakenly took that as a warning to behave befitting as the hero's daughter. A moment later, the birthday celebrant, together with her mother, welcomed the Duke and his daughter. Rosemary, the daughter of Earl Arlo, was happy to see Lady Floyen attend her party. At first, the young lady was hesitant to approach Juvel, but a second later, she grabbed her hand to thank her for coming. Lady Floyen couldn't help but adore the young lady in front of her, so she happily greeted her with a happy birthday. She then presented her small gift to her precious friend. Everyone got curious as to what it was, and when Lady Rose opened the gift, it was a powder with a mirror on it. The noble ladies got confused as to why she needed that, but it turns out it was a portable powder. Juvel thought that Rose didn't like it since she was silent for a while. Maybe she didn't need it because she had servants to carry the tools and fix her makeup for her. But a moment later, she was so happy that she was about to cry after receiving that gift. Not only Lady Rose but also the other noble ladies were curious how Jevélien came up with an amazing present. It was so convenient that it could fit in a pouch and could be used anywhere even without the servants. They called it Lady Floyen's top item for that month, so everyone would like to have their own. Rosemary politely asked at what workshop she got the portable powder from so she could get one for her mother. Everyone anticipated that she wouldn't share such information for something so spectacular, but the lady said that it was from the Fyodor workshop. She even added that the owner was still young but trustworthy for having quite a skill for his job. That surprised the people as the high society never shared any information like that. Because of that, they call her the Angel of Floyen. Jevélien finally had some fresh air and alone time on the terrace. She got tired of all the people surrounding her and their never-ending questions. While resting, the lady didn't notice that her father's student was on the top of the tree watching her. He was surprised as Juvel got tears in her eyes, so he wanted to know why she was crying suddenly. But the reality was that she kept tearing up whenever she yawned because she was so tired and wanted to go home already. Max couldn't take the sight of her crying, so he jumped down to ask the reason for it. On the other hand, Juvel was surprised to see her father's student there. When she was about to ask him, the prince wiped her tears and said not to cry anymore. He suddenly got furious if something happened to her inside and wanted to know who was it. His actions made Juvel curious if he would punish them if someone really did something to her, which Max didn't deny since he promised to help her after all. She could already tell, judging by his face, that he thought she would be grateful to him, but she knew it would end his life. It was because the law says that a commoner shouldn't talk casually to a noble if you don't want to end your life, so what more if one attacked them like the man in front of her was planning to do? Max had a serious look on his face, so Jevélien answered him since they were no strangers now. Instead of telling him who made her tears flow, she told him to watch his manners, which the prince got confused. She said that he needed to be more polite to other people because the way he talked could put him in danger. The nobles were sensitive about the topic of class differences in society. Because they have a class system, he should be careful of the people around him, except if it was just the two of them. The prince had no choice but to obediently obey her, and Juvel thought he was being a good boy. She was still curious as to what he was doing there, so she asked about it, and Max answered that he had some business there, but she was the real reason why he was at the party. He then questioned what she was doing outside alone and not being with her partner, so the lady answered that her father was in the hall. When the prince heard about his master's name, he got confused since she told him that her partner would be Geraldine, who was her relative. She just told him that it ended up that way, so Max didn't push that topic more, but instead, he heard the music inside, so she should be dancing right now. It made the lady wonder why nobody had asked her to dance yet, so she assumed that she really did have a bad reputation, but the truth was, it was her father's doing that no one dared to ask her for a dance. Judging by her silence, he knew that no one had asked her, so he bravely reached his hand to her. At first, Lady Flo Yen was confused as to why he was extending his hand to her, but Max told her that he was asking her to have a dance with him. Javelian couldn't believe that he knew how to dance, but the prince told her that she should be honored as he doesn't dance with just anyone. He smiled at her after saying that which Juval found very charming as he really was quite handsome. When she was about to get ready to lead their dance, she was surprised as Max was good at it. The more they dance, the more she finds him really good at dancing, so she assumes that he is not an amateur. A moment later, she stumbles while dancing, but luckily, the prince catches her. He scolded her a bit for spacing out during their dance, but they ended up being too close, so he stopped his words. Max didn't go there to end up like that, but they were getting closer and closer to the point that they were about to kiss. But suddenly, they got interrupted by the Duke, who was furious at the sight of them. Out of his anger, he crashed the glass he was holding and asked the prince what he was doing with his daughter. Before that scene happened, the Duke had planned to spend a peaceful time with his daughter at the party, but people started to surround him. He was getting bored with the conversation, so he looked for his daughter. When he saw her going to the terrace, he let her be as he assumed she was just getting some rest and everything should be fine. Sir Mikhail also happened to see Lady Flo Yen going outside the terrace and had the assumption that she purposely went there for him to follow her, so he planned to see her. But before he could pass by the door, Duke Flo Yen was already there to guard it and coldly stared at him. He thought that the Duke's attitude had changed because he broke up with his daughter, so he had no choice but to give up the opportunity to talk with Lady Flo Yen. The real reason why the Duke was being like that was that he read the letter sent by Sir Mikhail to his daughter. He didn't like the contents of the message, as if his daughter was being looked down on by that young man. It was good that Sir Mikhail didn't cause any commotion after that, since the Duke didn't want to ruin the party that his daughter was enjoying. Suddenly, he heard that his daughter was talking to someone, so he took a glance. Looking at the glass of the garden, even though he couldn't see who it was, he was sure that it was a man she was dancing with. He thought that the man was quite skilled as he avoided getting his attention. The Duke didn't bother to interrupt them since he could investigate that man's background later on, but suddenly, he heard his daughter scream. The reason was that the lady stumbled while dancing, but the Duke was unaware of it. Before he could enter that place, the worry of his daughter being in danger got him first, so he slammed the door. The moment he laid his eyes on the man whom his daughter was with, he already knew who it was. He broke the glass he was holding out of anger and ordered Max to get away from his daughter. On the other hand, the two who were having a good time and were about to kiss were surprised to see the Duke suddenly barge in there. Duke Flo Yen still remembered the young Max telling him that he was not going to thank him since it was the Duke's promise when he took him in as his student. There was no doubt that Maximilian had a good looks and good skills with a sword, but anything else than those, he was nothing but a vicious and arrogant prince. Despite that, the Duke still took him in because he knew he had potential, and also because of the previous Empress's request, but to think that he would dare to approach his daughter, he couldn't accept it. When he couldn't contain his anger towards the prince, the glass he broke caused his arm to have little cuts on it, so blood was flowing with wine. To stop his father from squeezing his injured hand, she held him to look like she was worried about her father. But deep inside her, she was anxious that his father went there because she was not showing her face at the party. Since the Duke assumed that his daughter was worried about him, he told her that they should get out there first, and later on, he would ask her what happened between her and the prince. Luckily, her father doesn't seem to be angry anymore, but she was worried that he was holding her hand too tightly. The prince interrupted them and held the lady's hand as he was worried about her foot after stumbling earlier, but the father slapped his hand and told him not to worry as it was none of his concern since he was his daughter. The Duke then carried his daughter in his arms, which surprised Lady Flo Yen. But before they could leave, his father ordered his student not to come to his residence anymore as he would be the one to visit him from that moment on. That surprised the prince since it appeared to be a warning not to approach the Duke's daughter. On the other hand, Javelian misinterpreted his father's concern for his student because the Duke responded in that manner when he was a person who barely reacted to anything. While walking out, she remembered her father saying she was his daughter. Since she knew the tragic end of the story, she shouldn't have hoped that her father really cared about her. The moment they were at the door, she almost forgot that they were at a party which people love to gossip about. When she realized that, she was nervous if her father really planned to carry her out of the ball like that. Since everyone was gazing at them, she urged the Duke to put her own, but her father insisted on carrying her because her foot was injured. The Duke was not getting her point. Her main concern was that she was becoming embarrassed because everyone was staring at them. Some of the noble ladies commented that Lady Flo Yen did that to catch everyone's attention since she was known for doing those kinds of things. Fortunately, some still saw Juval on the good side, that they wanted to protect her like the young Lady Arlo. She told everyone how they had forgotten one fact about Lady Flo Yen, and that was she had a weak body in the past. And even though she had not fully recovered, she still managed to come to her birthday, which was respectable of hers. Those who tried to slander her didn't have any choice but to agree with Lady Arlo. Some also remembered how Lady Flo Yen always had a weak constitution and even collapsed a few times before. Sir Mikhail heard everything the noble ladies just said. He remembered how Javilian struggled often whenever she followed him. He thought it was all an act to catch his attention, but now that he heard the fact, he felt bad for acting that way to her before. At Flo Yen residence, the Duke was taking care of his daughter and advised her to get some rest for a few days. He held Juvil's head, which shocked the lady, while reminding her to call for him when she was in pain. Looking at her father, she was confused at how he was acting like that all of a sudden when he never even cared about her existence before. She looked a bit sad when thinking about it, since her father wouldn't get any benefit at all while taking care of her. But suddenly, she just remembered that he really does get something, and it was the marriage between her and the crown prince, so she assumed that the Duke must take care of her before their marriage. Javilian thought that she had just gotten herself out of the main problem by breaking up with Sir Mikhail, but the next thing that came was worse than Mikhail, the tyrant crown prince. Just the thought of being with that prince made her tremble in fear. She refused to end up with that man, so she needed to come up with a plan. The next day at the Salon Blooms, Max still couldn't get Lady Flo Yen away from his mind. He even remembered that time at the party when they almost touched each other's lips, which made him blush. Madame Frisia could see how he became more distracted ever since he got back from the ball. A moment later, the prince ordered the madame to send an invitation and make up any reason for the meeting. When the madame asked who would be the receiver, Max said it should be Lady Flo Yen. After hearing that, Madame Frisia told him that it was not easy, as she became a celebrity these days. By celebrity, what Madame Frisia meant was the mounted letters Lady Flo Yen had been receiving the past few days. Even Juval was surprised to see how many letters she got. She was confused because she assumed that they would all slander her for being an attention seeker after causing a fuss at the ball. The reason she could think of that may cleaned her reputation was when she shared about the workshop where the portable powder came from. But right now she had no time to attend balls and was tired of it, so she would reject them for now by saying she was sick. The servant suddenly remembered that there was one letter that the lady required her attention first, and it was the letter sent by Earl Herend, the family where the previous empress's mother came from. Even if it was urgent, Javilian had no energy to deal with them, as she was worried about her father pairing her with the crown prince. She couldn't think of any plans at all except to look for a man that her father would acknowledge. When she was just thinking about that, his father's student suddenly knocked at her window again. She was not happy at all seeing him, as he disturbed her alone time thinking of a plan. Despite her annoyance towards Max, she still opened the door for him, since he thought of him as a stray cat coming back after she fed him. But before she could open the door for him, she thought of a better plan to solve her problems, so she let the prince inside with a happy look on her face. She bumps her head on Max's chest as she feels stupid for realizing the plan that popped out of her head just now while the prince was getting worried about her. She didn't mind Max's concerns and instead asked if he wanted to do it with her. He was confused as to what she was talking about, so Javilian explained it properly. With a serious expression on her face, she informed him they should date, which shocked the prince. Max was surprised to hear those words from her. Since that incident happened at the ball, it took him a whole week to visit Juval again, as he was waiting for his master to leave their house. But suddenly she asked him to date her. He couldn't believe that it was worth the wait. He had an assumption that Juval liked him so much, and that was why she was treating him so well. Since it looked like she wanted it so badly, Max would like to grant her request even though he was the one who liked it so much. He even thought about their future children already and even wanted to have twins. Juval, on the other hand, could guess what he was thinking, so for him not to misunderstand, she clarified that what she wanted was just a contractual relationship. While Max was confirming her words, Juval couldn't stop staring at him as he was really handsome. Besides that, he was her father's student, so he was definitely good with swords. In addition to that, the Duke respects him, so there is no one better suited than him for their act. But first, she needed his cooperation. Max asked what she meant by contractual relationship while coldly glaring at her. Looking at him with that expression on his face, Juval guessed it wouldn't be easy to persuade him, so she needed to come up with a great deal that a homeless mercenary like him would accept easily. In that case, money was the answer, so she offered whatever price he wanted. Max was getting mad while Juval thought that he hated her offer, so she added that it wouldn't take much of his time, he just needed to date her until she moved out. The prince was curious about her reason for moving, since it would be harder for her if she were to do that. She explained that it was because of her father's choice of whom he would like to marry her off. He was confused, since she could just say no if she didn't like that man, but Juval said that he was no ordinary person that she could reject easily. After hearing that, he was more curious as to who it was that even a duke's daughter couldn't reject. She was hesitant to tell him at first since no one knew about it, but she couldn't keep it a secret from him since she needed him to cooperate with her. It would cause her trouble if anyone found out about it, so she told him to keep it a secret, which he agreed. With a serious look on his face, he told her not to worry and just tell him who it was. Juval stated the full name as Maximilian Cashin Ashit. Max said that he was a nobody but stopped his words when he realized something. When she said that it was the Empire's crown prince, he got more shocked as the name finally sank in and she was talking about him. He suddenly froze and asked if she was sure about it, so Juval answered that she was. He still couldn't believe it as he found it strange and said that she may be telling a lie. There was nothing more to think about since she was a duke's daughter. The imperial family was clearly above them in terms of ranking. Moreover, it would be advantageous to the imperial family if the duke would become a family member of theirs, to which Max agreed. What worried her more was the imperial family's absolute power that she couldn't reject the marriage proposal. It all thanks to the founder of the empire, Archmage Ashit, saving the citizens from countless problems with his magic, thus making his descendants living gods by people. That was why she couldn't be the one who rejected the proposal first, as it was the same as defying the most powerful person in the empire. That was how she came up with her plan of dating someone before her father brought up the marriage arrangement. Having a scandal with another man would give her father a reason not to marry off her daughter. On the other hand, Max, being the crown prince, couldn't help but wonder if Juval hated the marriage so much, so he asked what she would do if she was the kind of girl that the crown prince liked. Juval was in great shock hearing his words as it was impossible, while Max leaned closer to her and said that the crown prince was the next ruler of the empire, so it could be a win for her as he could give her everything. He was seriously expecting something from her answer, and Juvelian thought about it for a while. But in the end, her answer hasn't changed and she would still run away from him. He asked why she would do that, so she answered that she would rather be alone than marry a sadist tyrant like the crown prince. That was the coldest and meanest words that crumpled every expectation he had for her. Because of that, he chose to leave instead, rather than to hear more from her, and Juval couldn't stop him. He was so fast to jump off her terrace that she couldn't even get his answer if he accepted her proposal or not. At Salon Bloom's spire, the crown prince was not in a good mood and surprised Frisia when he entered the room. She didn't expect him to come back so soon and noticed his angry face, so she asked if something happened. With a cold look on his face, he suddenly asked Frisia for her opinion of what a woman meant when she wanted to run away from her future husband. Instead of answering him directly, she wanted to know first if he wanted to hear a different response from the woman who hated her future husband. When he heard the word hate, he already assumed that Juval really hated him. Frisia had a hint that it was about Lady Floyen, but she still wanted to confirm, so she asked about it, but Max said not to mind his business. The madame teased him by saying that he may propose to Lady Floyen, but she didn't accept it and wanted to run away from him. She hit the spot as the crown prince got annoyed and told her that he didn't propose to her, but rather it was the opposite. But before he could say more, he stopped his words as Frisia just wanted to hear their stories. He then suddenly shifts their topic to the reports about the emperor. The madame told him that there was no news except for urging the crown prince to go back. She added that the empress sent an assassin again, but they kept him alive, so she asked what he wanted to do about it. While thinking about it, it was his stepmother who had been so desperate to end his life since he was little, the current empress, Isabel Rostai Ashit. It seemed like the empress, who ended his mother's life, had started to move again, so he was thinking if he would do the same to her or send back the assassin's head. But the thought of Juvelian saying she would run away so she wouldn't have to marry the sadist tyrant changed his mind and ordered to keep the assassin alive. His answer greatly shocked the madame, as he was not the type of person to let that matter go, but she still obeyed his order. Out of nowhere, he shyly asked if they received any marriage proposal for him. Frisia said that there was none, and if there was, she already informed him about it. When she asked why he was curious about that, he suddenly got up and excused himself. At the Floyen mansion, it has been a while since the father and daughter had their meals together, but as usual, it was awkward for Juvelian. She couldn't eat properly and thought that she should have stopped Max from leaving. That way, she wouldn't have to endure the silence between them. The Duke called his daughter's name while Juvelian was praying so hard in her mind for her father not to talk about anything related to the marriage. But her prayers were not heard as the Duke asked for her opinion about the crown prince. She answered that she hadn't thought about it and changed their subject immediately. She shared that she had been reading about the founding of the empire and the stories about the first emperor piqued her interest. It was said that he had all sorts of artifacts, so she was curious if those items were being passed down as of now. That surprised the Duke and suddenly excused himself for the reason that he had some urgent matters to attend to. Juval noticed his expression as she had not seen that look on his face before. Outside the mansion, the Duke regretted his action in front of his daughter earlier. He was thinking about Juval's studying about the imperial family. It worries him that her daughter might find out something. Even if the history book was not completely true, it wouldn't be good if she ever found something. He assumed that it was because of Max that his daughter was reading books about the imperial family. But still, even if his daughter was innocent, there was no way she had not heard any bad rumors going on about the crown prince. Suppose she was willing to accept him despite all that, he didn't know what to do anymore. Suddenly, Juval followed the Duke and called him. Her father asked what she was doing outside, and she answered that he didn't look good earlier, so she got worried. But at the back of her mind, she was wondering what she did wrong that made him mad like that. Hearing his daughter say those words took all the worries he had in mind and made him smile at her. Since it was cold outside, he gave her his cloak and invited her to go inside. Juval was a little surprised as she saw her father smile. A moment later, while they were walking, the Duke advised his daughter to learn more about the Crown Prince, which greatly shocked her, as he was a ruthless man who could end her life. Even though she couldn't accept the fact that her father really wanted to marry her off to the Crown Prince, she still put a smile on her face and obeyed her father. She then said her goodnight to him. While he was looking at the back of his daughter, he swore that he wouldn't let her date the Crown Prince. While Juval was walking away from her father, she already decided to propose again a contractual relationship with her father's student Max. That night, Juval doesn't look good because of indigestion. She couldn't even sleep well as she was having a hard time. Suddenly, a maid excused herself for disturbing her as a letter arrived for her in the afternoon. It came from Lady Rose, thanking her for attending her party and for the gift she gave for her. Juval felt happy since she was worried about leaving that day so suddenly, but instead the lady was also worried for her. At the back of the letter, it was said that she was invited to their afternoon tea. Since she had been staying at their home too much lately, she decided to go so she could also gather some more information about the Crown Prince. Lady Rose, together with some noble ladies, informed the others that Lady Flo Yen was fully recovered. That was good news to the ladies as they hadn't heard anything from her after she left the party. Lady Rose also asked if they were against Lady Flo Yen joining their next afternoon tea, and everyone was excited to say that they were not. She then asked the last member of their group who would be hosting the next afternoon tea party. She was Veronica Joanna Terrence. She hesitated for a moment as it seemed she didn't like Lady Flo Yen at all. Since she couldn't say that out loud to other ladies, she had no choice but to agree with them. After the tea party, Lady Veronica releases her anger by sharing what happened earlier to Mikhail. She couldn't accept the fact that Lady Rose Arlo invited her friend without asking her, who had more rights since she would be the host of the next tea party. Mikhail wasn't even interested in listening to her, so he reasoned that he was so tired and talk about it next time. When the lady said that the friend Lady Arlo invited was Lady Flo Yen, Mikhail looked at her with a surprised look on his face. He wanted to confirm it if he heard it right, so he asked her and Veronica answered yes. Mikhail easily changed his attitude and came closer to the lady to ask if she could invite him to her tea party. Veronica couldn't help but be attracted by his beauty when he said that he was worried about her if Lady Flo Yen was there. Since she couldn't refuse such a handsome guy, she easily agreed to his request. On the other hand, Mikhail had a hidden motive for going there, and it was to finally meet Lady Flo Yen again. Meanwhile, at Arcade Boulevard, Juvelian visited that place to find some suited clothes for the tea party that she would be attending. But the problem was that her father assigned so many guards for her that could get in the way of her shopping. When she looked at some dresses that were on display, she thought that they were too much for an informal gathering. It made her wonder if they were popular these days since all the stores she visited were selling the same designs. Suddenly, a woman's voice appeared beside her and advised her not to wear any of those dresses. It was Madame Frisia, but Juvelian didn't seem to recognize her. The guards were so happy for their lady that someone finally talked to her after all the rumors surrounding her. The madame commented that it wouldn't suit her figure because she was quite slender. She added that she had an elegant image, so wearing those trendy dresses would ruin it. Juval agreed with her and happily thanked her for her advice. Frisia now understands why the Crown Prince fell for the lady after seeing her up close. On the other hand, Juval was still thinking who was the madame who helped her. Now that her shopping was done, she planned to go home. But suddenly, a commotion caught her attention about a noble boasting his position. When she took a quick look, she recognized the man on the ground named Baron Gordon, who was famous for being arrogant. Another man's voice suddenly talked and said that he didn't need to apologize to the Baron as he fell on his own. Juval commented that the other man's voice was as shameless as the Baron with a similar attitude. It turns out it was Max, her father's student, and it confused her as to why he was there. The Baron couldn't take his anger anymore and ordered the guards to arrest the man in front of him for offending a noble by a mere commoner. Before Max could finalize how he should end the Baron's life, Juvelian showed up in front of him and stopped the arrogant noble. That surprised the Crown Prince as he didn't expect her to defend him. The Baron trembled in fear as he recognized the Duke's daughter. The lady then greeted him on behalf of his father and stated her name, Juvelian Eloy Flo Yen. He then did the same while bowing his head. But before he could state his name, Juval interrupted him as she already knew him. When the Baron realized that the young lady knew him, he planned to use the situation he was currently in. He fluttered her with his words and said that he was honored to meet her, but Juval couldn't feel his sincerity. Because of her cold attitude towards him, he asked if he offended her by chance. The lady realized that the Baron treated people lower than him like dirt while in front of her. He acted politely, so Juval wanted to do the same to him. Suddenly, she ordered the Baron, using her father's status as hero of the Empire, not to punish her man. Max's face turned red after hearing the word, my man, and thought it was the same as saying her husband. But Juval whispered not to misunderstand her, as she was saying that to save her from that situation which crushed his expectations. She stated loudly that the Baron just threatened the very person that her father assigned to her as her personal bodyguard, which shocked everyone. On the other hand, the real bodyguards appreciated their lady's concern for them and were happy to hear it. She then informed the Baron that he would get punishment for harming a guard from the Floyens household. Max couldn't help but be annoyed inside him as his expectations had already been crushed and now he was getting treated as a bodyguard. The Baron couldn't accept it and told the lady that Max was the one who harmed him and dared to talk back to a noble. But what actually happened was that he couldn't accept the fact that the Crown Prince was getting more attention than him and started a fight while using his status to harass Max. Given the attitude of the Crown Prince, of course, he responded to his provocation rudely. The Baron was not only an arrogant man but also shameless since he dared to ask for compensation from the lady for the insult. The Crown Prince was so sure that Juval wouldn't give in to his nonsense request. But to his surprise, the lady asked for consideration just this time, as her guard came from the mountains without knowledge of the real world, and it was partly her fault as well for not teaching him properly, so she would take all the responsibility for it. A sudden change of attitude could be seen on his face as he already expecting a sum of money from the lady. Everyone was astounded, especially the noble and the Crown Prince, when she told the Baron to talk down on her just like what her guard did to him, so they could call it even. She was insisting on doing it, but the Baron clearly couldn't dare to do it. Max suddenly realized that the lady was not a fool and couldn't easily be taken advantage of. What the Baron could only do was to swear in his mind the lady in front of him. He had no choice but to apologize to her for causing a commotion. Since it was not the lady that he harassed earlier, Juval told him to do that to Max instead of her. Even though it would hurt his pride to apologize to a commoner, he had no choice but to do it in front of a duke's daughter. He was giving Max a deadly glare while swearing at him in his mind, but he backed out easily when the Crown Prince did the same. Lady Juvelian asked if she was okay since it could have been gone bad. Before answering her, he thought that he could have handled it, but since she still helped him, he should thank her somehow. What worried him was how he should do it, since she said that he should be polite to her if other people were around so they could also do the same, then he should do that. Juval was so confused as to what he was thinking because he was not responding at all to her. Suddenly, Max held her hand like a gentleman should and properly thanked her for saving him. The noble ladies who were present there couldn't help but adore the two who were in front of them. Juval, on the other hand, was a little surprised by his actions and asked herself if he was doing it because of what she said before, but the question was, why now? After that, Max continued to be polite to her while saying that he was glad to see her again since he had something to say to the lady. When Juval asked what it was, the Crown Prince answered that he agreed to have a contractual relationship with the lady. She covered his mouth and whispered that he shouldn't say something so important in a public place like that. Since the crowd started to gossip about them, she invited him to follow her to the carriage. While they were inside, Juval asked Max what was his reason for the sudden change of his mind. Since he left her that time without answering if he agreed or not, she thought he refused her. The reason why he couldn't answer her before was because of what she said about the Crown Prince being a ruthless tyrant. And that tyrant that she hated so much was actually the man in front of her right now. Juval was staring at him while thinking that there was something he couldn't tell her. At the same time, Max avoided her gaze as he couldn't say his true identity at the moment. Juval suddenly asked what was he doing at the arcade since it didn't look like he was shopping. Max answered rudely as if he was not allowed to go there without a reason. Because of his attitude, the lady couldn't help but be annoyed with him as he could say that normally. When looking at her, he suddenly remembered the reason why he was actually at the arcade. It was because of what Madame Frisia reported about the tea party that Juval would be attending. She heard that Sir Mikhail would also be there. When the Crown Prince asked why that man was going there, the Madame answered that it was maybe because he still had feelings for Lady Floyen. After hearing that, Max decided to go out for a bit, but before he could leave, Frisia hinted to him that the lady was not at their home. That was how he ended up meeting her after asking around. But he couldn't say that in front of the lady. He was getting fired up at the thought of Sir Mikhail attending the party. He needed first to make the contractual relationship with Juval happen so that Mikhail couldn't do anything to her. Meanwhile, the lady was getting anxious as to what he was thinking to make that kind of expression on his face. Before anything could get awkward, she suggested to talk about the conditions of their contract. But before she could continue, Max interrupted her to ask why she chose him instead of others. The lady thought about the answer for a while, and Max was getting nervous as to what her answer could be. His expectations were crushed again when Juval said that he had been vetted by his father even though he had nothing. It was not because she liked him but because he was her father's student. But Juval added that the other reason was that he was the only one she could comfortably ask something like that. His crumpled expectations got reborn again as it was a good enough answer for him that made his face turn red. The lady thought that even though he had a bad temper, his face was definitely her type. The lady wanted to talk about his payment, so she asked him how much he wanted. After hearing that, Max got annoyed again. He clarified that he doesn't need a payment and just thinks of their contract as a repayment for injuring her last time. She was so happy that she suddenly grabbed his arm to thank him for his generosity. Since Max didn't want money, she just gave him free room and board whenever he wanted, and just asked her if there was anything that he wanted. When Max said to let his hand go, Juval held it more tightly since they needed to pretend like lovers from that moment on since their whole act had her on the line. She reminded him that while they were in a contractual relationship, they needed to hold hands, lock arms, and call each other's names romantically. They hadn't had a proper introduction, so Juval wanted to say her name, but Max stopped her as he already knew her from the start. The two of them had different thoughts. One was annoyed as he already knew her name, but he kept calling her you, while the other was blushing as the lady kept holding onto his hands. She remembered her father calling him Max, so she asked if that was his name, which he agreed while avoiding her gaze. It was a nice name was what she thought, and knew that he would become a great person. She realized that it was not just his looks that she liked, but all of him was her type. She complimented his name while saying that his parents must have given him such a name so he could be a great person. Hearing that coming from her made the crown prince so happy. But not too long, his face turned cold when the lady told him that they should write the contract. It wasn't needed since he already told her that he didn't need any money from her, but Juval had never thought that her father hadn't even taught his student how writing a contract was important. She had no choice but to explain how a contract would something helpful in the future, especially if she took advantage of him. Max confidently told her that she would never do something like that, which surprised her. It was the first time that someone trusted her. Everyone hated her for being a villainess in their eyes, and she had already used to it. When something bad happened, they blamed it on her, and no one even cared to listen and believe her, even on the verge of her death. But the man in front of her trusted her completely. It touched her heart as no one ever believed her before. Juval didn't want to think about it anymore and told him that it was those people you trusted the most who would take advantage of you. With that being said, she reminded him not to be fooled by people he trusted easily just because they were close. So a written contract is a must, which he agreed. She didn't know if he really did get what she said or just agreed with everything she was saying. All of a sudden, she grabbed his collar to pull him closer to her and said that their mouths should match, which surprised the crown prince. He wanted to back away from her, but the lady insisted to come closer to her. Max thought it was still too early for them to kiss as he couldn't prepare himself, and besides, it was his first kiss. He couldn't help it since it was also important, so he closed his eyes and was ready to do it. But Juval whispered that her personal guard, Geraldine, would ask how they met, so they needed to make sure their stories match. The truth was, she came closer to whisper that to him since they would hear it outside. Max composed himself immediately so she wouldn't suspect anything that he was expecting a kiss from her, but he was still embarrassed on the inside for what he did. They finally arrived at the Floyen mansion, and the guards, especially Geraldine, were waiting for her explanation of the situation. She apologized to them for introducing him so late and told them that he was her lover. That shocked everyone, and Geraldine couldn't believe every single word she said, since they had been guarding her the whole time and they had never seen that man with her. He assumed that she picked him up somewhere just because of his looks again. Juval needed to act perfectly, so she told him happily that it was obvious that they had never seen him before because she met him at Count Meisen's party. After hearing that, Geraldine assumed that Max was a noble. Even though he dressed as a mercenary, an elegant presence could be felt from him. He was wondering which family he came from. But a second later, he got it all wrong as Juvilien informed them that her lover was not a noble but a mercenary hired at the party. That greatly shocked the guards, but what confused Geraldine was how a mere mercenary got close to the lady. That irritated Max as to how he got treated even though he was the crown prince. Despite that, he couldn't help it since only a few people knew his face and Juval had a plan in mind. Earlier that day, they already talked about her plan. At first, Max didn't agree with her as he was the one who should be saving her, not the other way around. Juval explained that they wouldn't believe that as she had her guards around her all the time. Max saving her just doesn't make any sense at all. She just needed him to play along and endure it for now, which he then agreed. So, Juval told them proudly that she saved him. It all started with Max surrounded by a group of noble ladies. Since he couldn't get out of that situation, Juval came in and asked if they saw Sir Mikhail. When they heard that and saw her, they all ran away. That was how Max wanted to repay her for saving him. They didn't want to believe her story at first, but then they realized that their lady also saved him earlier at the arcade, so it makes sense at all. Juval added that they met again at Count Arlo's party and she thought that they were fated already. After the storytelling, she invited Max inside the mansion. Geraldine couldn't think of any other reasons why she fell for him except his looks, just like how she fell for Mikhail. Before they could leave, Juval asked if he was looking down on her lover just because he was a commoner. The knight tried to defend himself, but Juval saw how he glared at him. But she just had no clue as to how Max looked at them. Geraldine could feel his aura and thought he was far more different from normal. He wondered who he might be, that he looked quite familiar with him. On the other hand, while they were walking, Juval was worried if he was okay, to which Max answered that he was. She assured him that there was nothing to be nervous about, as she would protect him no matter what happened. Even though he had no clue as to whom she would protect him from, he still smiled at the thought of it. The moment they stepped inside the house, the Duke was there and was in great shock after seeing the two of them. All of the emotions could already be seen on his face while calling his daughter's name as if he was waiting for her explanation. Juvelian then formally introduced Max to her father as the man she loved. Hearing her say those words made him speechless, as if her daughter was taken away from him. Max, on the other hand, was a little anxious as they declared their love with their lives on the line. Both Juval and Max were anxious after seeing the Duke's reaction. She thought it would be better to introduce Max, already as he would eventually find out soon anyway, but she didn't expect her father to react so badly. She then told Max to greet the Duke, while her father had a cold and displeased look. He asked for an explanation from his daughter as to what was going on at the moment. Seeing her father get so angry was a first for her, since he didn't care about anything she did before, even if it was that bad. She had thought that maybe it was because his plan of marrying her to someone else was disturbed, and she chose his student instead. Since they already started it, there was no way to back out now, so she happily told her father that they formally started dating. The Duke was in great shock that he didn't know where things went wrong. He was fuming in anger as he had been always careful with Juval so that his student couldn't even get near her. In the drawing room, Max helped Juval in her seat, which the lady accepted with a smile on her face. Their affection agitated the Duke even more and thought that being kind to her daughter was his way to trick her. He knew what the prince had in mind. He still remembered how he easily killed their comrade who betrayed them and wanted to show the body to the rest of their team as a lesson, but the Duke stopped him immediately. That was the kind of person the prince was, so he knew Max was using his daughter to speed up their rebellion. Suddenly, the Duke asked how they first met. It was the question she needed to answer carefully, as her father couldn't be fooled easily like her cousin Geraldine and the rest of the knights. She came up with an idea to tell the truth with a little lie on it, so she answered the Duke that Max visited one late night looking for him, but he was not in the house. After that, he went to her as if he had nowhere to go, so Juval let him sleep in her room as it was so late at night that time. That greatly shocked the Duke as he assumed that they slept together in her room. Juval immediately explained that nothing had happened between them, which Max also nodded. Looking at his student, the Duke thought that if he did something to her, he wouldn't let him escape their house alive. He angrily told Max that he should have talked to Derek for the room. She defended Max by saying that they didn't want to bother Derek, and also the knights came by to him. What surprised the Duke was when she said that since he was his student, she was sure he wouldn't do anything to her. Her father couldn't even tell her that the prince was the most dangerous man he ever knew. Even after trying countless times to change his terrible personality, it all failed as he was already the worst tyrant. He knew that after getting what he wanted from Juval, he would definitely hurt her without a second thought. Looking at his innocent daughter, he assumed that she had no idea she was being threatened. It was all his fault and regretted taking in the prince as his student. Suddenly, Juvelian told her father all of her experiences before about having one-sided love, so having someone who loved her now was a miracle for her. She knew that her father didn't trust her because of how she lived before, but she swore that she wouldn't bring any more shame to his name from that moment on, and asked to approve their relationship. After hearing the word shame, the Duke was in shock as it was the opposite. He loved Juvelian the most, that whatever she did, he didn't care to bother and let her do what she wanted. But this time he couldn't do it if it was related to the prince, so he told her that he disapproved of them and said to break up already, which surprised both Juval and Max. She couldn't help but feel sad as her father was so determined to marry her off to the crown prince. She couldn't bear to imagine herself, the one and only daughter of the Duke, marrying the psycho crown prince of the empire. Max interrupted her deep thoughts by holding her hand and said that he refused to accept the Duke's disapproval. That confused Juvelian, while the Duke got triggered even more. Before his master could say anything, he explained himself by sharing the advice that the Duke said before. He told Max that swords were meant to protect those people you loved. People get stronger when they protect their weakness, and his master said that Max would understand it someday when he found someone he wanted to protect. After saying that, he placed her hand on Juval's shoulder while saying that he already found his weakness, and she was the one he wanted to protect. On the other hand, the lady couldn't believe how good he was in acting. Max then told his master that even he couldn't stop them from seeing each other. The Duke stopped the prince from talking anymore as he couldn't stand him. He still remembered how Max called Juval a rat before, and now he calls her his precious. The crown prince already got irritated and told his master that he wouldn't stay still if he kept rejecting them. On the other hand, the Duke said that if he would keep his attitude like that, then he had no choice but to disown him as his student. Meanwhile, Juvelian got stuck in between them and was confused as to what was going on at the moment. Max then accepted his decision and invited Juval to just go, but the lady didn't know what to do while the two were disowning each other. When they were about to leave, the Duke yelled to stop both of them. He grabbed Max as he didn't listen to him, but the prince glared at the Duke and said not to order him around. Juval called Max's attention as he was already disrespectful towards her father, and if they left like that, he would never welcome them anymore. With a pleasing look on her face, the lady told her father that she would solve the issue. After seeing her like that, the Duke had no choice but to let his daughter and the prince go. While walking outside, Juvelian tried to stop Max as she needed to talk to him. He had no intention of stopping, but when she said that it was important, he immediately listened. The Crown Prince asked what it was, so Juval answered that his actions were a bit too much even if it was for her sake. Max couldn't believe what she just said even though he fought his master to help her. She explained that he didn't help her at all as she didn't want that to happen. Her father disowned him as his student and Max insulted her father. She didn't want any of that to happen. What surprised the Crown Prince was when she said that forcing things on someone who doesn't even want it was not helping them but just doing it for himself. Max was saddened by her words and asked if she didn't need his help anymore. Juvelian held his hand and answered that she still needed him, but if he continued his way to be like that, then she had no choice but to look for other ways. Since he still wanted to be with her, he asked Juval what she wanted him to do. The lady answered that to make peace with her father. When he heard that, Max reacted as if he didn't want to do it. Juvelian added that someone needed to apologize first in order to have peace between them. There was no way the Crown Prince would do something like that, but Juval was staring at him so intently as if she was pleasing him. She still had not heard his answer, so she knew he hated it as it would hurt his pride. She didn't want to force him to do something for her since it was her problem after all. But to her surprise, Max suddenly said that he would do it. Meanwhile, the Duke was observing both of them and couldn't believe that the Crown Prince obeyed what Juval wanted. He also saw how his daughter smiled at his student while thanking him. It made the Duke wonder if the Max he knew really did change because of Juvelian. When they finally went back inside where her father was, she told him that Max had something to say to him. He knew that the Crown Prince would not change immediately as he had known him for a whole 10 years. Max then bowed his head as a sign of respect and apologized for his rude behavior earlier while calling him again his master. The Duke won't easily be fooled by his apology as he still remembers how the Crown Prince mocked him for having a weakness like his daughter. He stared at him intently as he assumed that he was just acting to get his daughter to be part of his plans. Since he didn't believe him even if he bowed like that, he still firmly said that he was no longer his student. Judging by his answer, Max knew now that the Duke would never accept them, and seeing how he strongly disagreed with it, he would never plan to marry his daughter to him. He thought that Juvelian took their situation lightly, but with how things were at the moment, he had no plan to go out of his way now to make peace with his master. Juvelian knew that they would never patch things up with the tension going on right now between them, so she had no choice but to do something serious to stop them. The Duke and the Crown Prince were in great shock when the lady suddenly kneeled before them. While she was in that state, she apologized to her father and told her that it was all her fault. Her plan was to plead with the Duke for forgiveness and keep kneeling until he accepted her relationship with Max. The Crown Prince was in great shock after seeing her down as he should be the one doing it and not her. While looking at him like that, she thought that Max had no idea how scary her father was when he was angry, and what she was doing now would not be enough for his forgiveness. So she told him that she wouldn't get up unless she finished talking with her father. When the Duke heard her, he easily agreed with her and extended his hand for her daughter to get up. Looking at the two, Juvelian couldn't believe how they suddenly got along very well. She knew that her father had not accepted Max's apology, so she explained that his rudeness towards him was all because of his love for her, and asked the Duke to forgive him as she would teach him better. To her surprise, her father agreed easily and the two began to beg again for her to stand up already. A moment later, they all seated again at the table, and Juval thought that things could end pretty smoothly if she were careful, but when she was just thinking about it, her father said that he forgave his rudeness but he was still against their relationship. The lady explained that they were not asking for his approval right away, but he just needed to observe things between them even for just a short period. Before saying anything, the Duke already decided not to accept their relationship even if she pleaded, but looking at her face like that, no parent could say no to their child, and he knew that the Crown Prince would eventually do what he wanted anyway. He stared at Max as if he was giving him a warning while having a thought that he would just slowly show her daughter what the Crown Prince's true face was, and they would eventually break up for sure. The Duke agreed to his daughter, which surprised the two. Max couldn't believe that his master was giving his permission and agreed to date his daughter, while on the other hand, Juvelian couldn't contain her happiness and held her father's hand while expressing her appreciation to him. Instead of being happy, he felt guilty for lying to his lovely daughter, but at the same time, he did it to protect her as she would just get hurt in the end if she were to stay with Maximilian. In Juvelian's room, the lady couldn't still believe that she made her cold-hearted father agree that easily. To make everything final, she suggested making a formal contract and asked if he had something he wanted to write in the contract. She noticed how well-mannered Max was when he was drinking the tea, so she thought that maybe he was a noble who just run away from his family. But a moment later, he was disgusted by the taste even if the tea was of finer quality, so Juval's assumption of him being a noble went away. After Max wrote his condition for their contract, the lady couldn't help but laugh at it since they were doing the act because she didn't want to meet another man, and yet he still wrote it. Before she could even complain, the Crown Prince pointed at his second condition. He wrote that the lady should always call him by his name Max. When she read that, she shyly suggested that he would do the same to her. Seeing her face like that, he avoided her eyes while agreeing with her. Looking at the draft of their contract, she couldn't accept it as it was all a mess, so she decided to fix everything starting with the grammar first to make it more formal. After a few hours of changing everything, Juval finally finished it, but it looked like it drained her energy. Instead of reading it all, the Crown Prince tore the paper and said that he couldn't accept it. The lady couldn't believe that he just tossed what she had worked so hard, when he could just tell if there was something he didn't want from it. Juval couldn't take his attitude anymore. When she remembered everything, Max was always like that. The moment when she helped him a few days after sleeping in her room, he didn't bother to say a word before leaving. When she proposed a contractual relationship to him, he just jumped out suddenly without even getting a reply if he agreed or not. Thinking about it, he always gets mad at her more than a few times already, and she was just tolerating it since they had nothing to do with each other. But now that they agreed to do the contractual relationship and would keep seeing each other, she would not just stay still and accept his attitude like that. She decided not to let anyone else look down on her anymore, so she told Max that she wanted to end their contract right away. Max's eyebrow creased when Javelian handed him an employment contract outlining the terms of their agreement. As the Crown Prince read the document, he did not anticipate that there would be many rules that they must follow. It seemed that he wanted to complain when he read that they must report their whereabouts to each other because, in reality, he never did that to his subordinates. The only part that he can consider is asking for mutual consent regarding their date locations. But there was one condition that made him completely tear the document into pieces, thinking that the lady was perceiving him as a pet. His action only offended Javelian, which made her want to end their contract immediately. Max was startled by her sudden decision, so he reminded her of the reason why they must have a contract relationship. Otherwise, she would be marrying the Crown Prince, the person she hated the most if she cancelled their agreement. But the lady seemed resolute in her decision, having seen enough of his behavior to conclude that they were simply not suited for each other. She understood that continuing their partnership would only lead to wasted time and energy for both of them. The way he had ripped up the document with such disregard only reinforced her belief. It felt as if he had no intention of compromising, which was a crucial quality in any agreement, one that Javelian simply could not afford to make a contract with. Max felt a pang of regret as he reflected on her perspective. He remembered a time in his youth when he would mindlessly tear up any document that didn't meet his approval. That pattern of behavior had become his habit since he was younger. No one ever dared to complain about it to him before, so he does not know how to deal with the wrath of the lady in front of him. He was taken aback when Javelian questioned whether he enjoyed having his opinions disregarded by anyone. In that moment, Javelian was reminded of her past relationship with Mikhail, her ex-lover, who had constantly ignored her thoughts and feelings. Those days were filled with self-doubt and frustration, where she felt invisible and unvalued. That made Max realize that the lady was disappointed in what he did. As for the Crown Prince, he felt so guilty about it. However, his pride was resisting the urge to openly show his concern for her feelings. Javelian turned her back and stated that they could just end their agreement if helping her would be difficult for him. After all, she was the one who asked for him. Max felt a sudden realization sink in. If he continued being stubborn, he would never see the lady again. That thought made him apologize immediately. As he did, he found himself signing the contract and became obedient to her. Because of that, Javelian was taken aback by this change in his demeanor and wondered what had inspired him. With the contract now finalized, the lady felt a surge of excitement. That is also the signal that they could announce to society that they were lovers. To start their act, she seized the opportunity to further solidify their new relationship by inviting Max to accompany her to an upcoming tea party hosted by Lady Terrence. Her invitation prompted Max to ask if she knew who else would be attending the party. As Javelian answered the names, he realized she had no idea that her ex-lover Sir Mikhail would also be there. He remembered that someone told him that the host of the party secretly invited Sir Mikhail on her own. Because of that, Max was determined to come to the party with Javelian. As a gift, he wanted to show her the sight of Mikhail being completely crushed. The lady was wondering why the disciple of his father was acting strangely, but Lady Floyen trusted that she would be fine with him. On the day of the party at Count Terrence's residence, they were taken aback to see Veronica arriving with Marquis Mikhail. While Veronica was the host and had the right to invite anyone, Lady Arlo felt compelled to voice her discontent, noting that Veronica hadn't consulted the other members of their group before making such a decision. However, the tables turned when the Marquis pointed out that Lady Arlo too had decided on her own. The other women at the party began to side with the Marquis, recalling that Rose had also invited Lady Floyen without prior approval. They decided that perhaps exceptions could be made for these two individuals, thinking it only fair to bend the rules for them. The unanimous agreement among the guests left Rose feeling betrayed. She was certain that having the Marquis around would only make Javelian uncomfortable. Later on, the grand door opened, and the one they expected to be alone came with an unexpected guest. They were surprised to see a strikingly handsome man beside Javelian, confidently holding her hand. The reaction of the Marquis seemed petrified to see this unfamiliar presence beside his ex-lover. That is the reaction Max is aiming to show to Javelian. He wanted her to see the Marquis's reaction, to witness the fury and jealousy that bubbled beneath the surface the moment he saw her with someone else. Marquis Mikhail was the one who asked Lady Terrence to invite him to the party. He pretended to be worried about her when he found out that his ex-girlfriend would come. This manipulation convinced the host to welcome him. Upon arriving at the venue, he spotted Lady Rose, who was overly protective of Javelian by just seeing his presence. He smirked inwardly, knowing that she could do little to challenge him now that he was there. All he had to do was wait for his ex-girlfriend's arrival to execute his plan while keeping close to Lady Veronica like his new woman. But he did not see this coming. Javelian walked in with another man, and it immediately drew the attention of every woman in the room, captivated by his good looks. Lady Rose, maintaining her composure, politely inquired about the man, and Lady Flo Yen introduced Max as her lover, solidifying the rumor of her new relationship. Everyone commented how they looked good together when she answered that. In the back of his mind, Max wished Javelian would repeat her declaration loudly enough for Mikhail to hear. Meanwhile, the lady beside him basked in the compliments, appreciating his convincing act in front of everyone else to show that they were lovers. When Javelian turned her glance, she did not expect to see Mikhail at the party. Everyone saw how they exchanged glances, which made them focus on observing the encounter of the ex-lovers with their new partners. On the other hand, Mikhail, grappling with his feelings, initially thought Javelian had simply moved on to another man. However, he quickly reassured himself that she wouldn't easily let go of their past. The way she referred to Max by his first name only reinforced his belief that this new man has a lower quality of life than him. Mikhail greeted his ex-lover with a smile that dripped with insincerity, which only served to irritate Max further. While for Lady Flo Yen, she was wondering why he was smiling when they were not supposed to be happy to see each other. In the past, she fell for that smile of his, and she thought that she would follow him for the rest of her life. But now, she could not believe that she did not care about him at all. Javelian just simply greeted him back, and returned her attention to Max to thank him for escorting her to the venue. Max pulled her closer while glaring to Mikhail, who was looking intently at them. He knew that he was already furious for the way he touched her and for being by her side. When Rose heard that the handsome man would leave after escorting her, she suggested that having another unexpected guest would not be a problem since they already had one. Max liked the idea as he viewed Rose as an ally. Most of the girls agreed to her suggestion, which made Javelian worried at the thought of Max staying longer than planned. Mikhail disagreed with making him stay since Javelian was already an unexpected guest. Although his argument was in the favor of her, it sounded as though he was attempting to assert authority he didn't possess. Rose defended that in Lady Flo Yen's case, everyone priorly agreed to have her presence at the party, which is completely different from his case. To stop the argument, Lady Veronica interjected, agreeing that keeping the new visitor would only breed favoritism. However, since he was Javelian's partner, she suggested preparing a separate room for him as a waiting area. Lady Flo Yen expressed her gratitude for Veronica's hospitality, silently thanking her for saving the moment that she might end up taking care of Max during the party. But in the back of Lady Veronica, she was already pissed off since she made everyone feel comfortable around Sir Mikhail. The tea party went on as they all gathered at a long table while having tea. Mikhail suddenly wiped off something from the face of Lady Terrence that shows how sweet he is to the lady. He knew that Javelian saw what he did and how he acted, which made him certain that she had not forgotten him. On the other hand, Lady Flo Yen seemed to like seeing her previous self to the host of the party, who fell deeply in love with the Marquis. But now she understood that Mikhail's affections were merely a facade, a ploy since he was destined to marry a princess. This means that this will only leave Veronica in pain. If that happened, she just hoped that she would not become a villainess. Meanwhile, Max was already losing his patience staying in that fancy room. Before he left the party, Javelian reminded him not to cause any trouble while he was waiting for her. Recalling Mikhail's fake smile when he greeted Javelian, he sensed that the Marquis was plotting something. He remembered when someone reported to him that the Marquis never defended Javelian after she was hated by everyone for loving him. He only used the lady's resources to his own advantage. Deciding he could not wait any longer, he chose to make trouble even if the lady told him not to. Max stood up from his seat and prepared himself to get started with what he had planned in mind. At the gathering, Sir Mikhail openly flaunted his affection for Lady Veronica, making sure the other ladies noticed. He even invited her to a picnic at some point, to which Lady Veronica eagerly agreed, asking when it would take place. Mikhail didn't care when. His main goal was simply to make sure Javelian overheard their conversation. He knew how much Javelian despised it when women showed interest in him. By showing such obvious interest in Lady Veronica, Mikhail was hoping Javelian would react, certain that she would make a scene any moment. However, Lady Flo Yen didn't seem to care. She was too engrossed in a conversation with the other ladies about her lover. She happily described Max to them, while the others shared their first impressions of him. Meanwhile, Mikhail watched her with confusion. Lady Flo Yen, usually so focused on him, was now completely ignoring him, which was unlike her. As Lady Veronica leaned toward him, Mikhail couldn't help but wonder why Javelian wasn't reacting. Suddenly, Lady Rose suggested something to the group. She wanted to invite Lady Flo Yen to join their tasting event and asked everyone for their opinion. The idea caught Javelian off guard, and she immediately tried to decline. As the ladies discussed, Mikhail's frustration grew. He watched Javelian, annoyed by the disinterest she was showing toward him while focusing on the other women. Although Lady Flo Yen claimed she was fine, the other ladies seemed eager for her to join their event, and it piqued Javelian's interest. It would be a good chance to meet others her age, but she hesitated. She knew that Lady Veronica and Sir Mikhail might not approve, and she feared they would ostracize her, so she considered rejecting the offer. Just then, Lady Veronica voiced her opposition. She reminded everyone that the event had strict sign-up requirements, and anyone wishing to join had to follow the proper procedure. Lady Rose, though disappointed, agreed. The requirements had been established long before the group was formed. Javelian considered speaking up, offering that she didn't mind if she didn't meet the requirements, but she stopped mid-sentence when something caught her eye. She froze, staring out the window in shock. Max was there, perched in a tree, gazing intently at her. His handsome face seemed to glow as the sunlight hit it, and Javelian's mind went blank. She couldn't focus on the conversation anymore, her thoughts consumed by the worry that someone might see Max. As the ladies continued to discuss the event's details, Javelian's mind raced, wondering how long he had been there. Sir Mikhail, noticing her distraction, followed her gaze and saw Max. His anger flared at the sight of the man, especially when he saw how calmly Max observed them. Mikhail's jealousy and frustration reached a boiling point. Lady Rose asked if Javelian had been following their discussion, but she absent-mindedly replied, yes, her mind still fixed on Max. Seeing her attention elsewhere, Mikhail seethed with rage. His blood boiled, realizing that instead of focusing on him, Javelian was staring at Max. When he looked back out the window and saw the man again, he made a provocative gesture toward Sir Mikhail, as if daring him to respond. Unable to control himself any longer, Sir Mikhail stood up abruptly and excused himself, claiming he needed some fresh air. Lady Veronica reached out to him, offering to accompany him, but he roughly shook off her hand, muttering that he would go alone. As he turned, his previously composed expression twisted into one of fury, as if he were ready to confront someone. Javelian, still anxious, recalled her father's warning about Max's rude behavior, and she couldn't help but agree. She worried that someone might see Max, but when she looked back at the tree, he was gone. Meanwhile, the ladies were excitedly discussing the tea that Lady Flo Yen would bring to their tasting event, though Javelian was still lost in her thoughts, confused by the conversation. Lady Rose, looking forward to the event, said she was eager to see what tea Lady Flo Yen would contribute. Javelian, still distracted, asked what she meant. Rose explained that the tea selection was part of the requirements for joining their group. Javelian hadn't realized that this was part of the process, and she had no idea what had happened earlier while she had been distracted by Max. Meanwhile, Sir Mikhail had stepped outside, his anger still boiling over. He was determined to confront Javelian's lover, having taken offense at Max's earlier provocation. Max soon appeared, responding calmly that he had taken the time to come outside to find him. The knight's rage intensified at the sight of him, his face hardening with fury. Javelian was lost in thought as she stood in the washroom, reflecting on Lady Rose's words. She couldn't help but wonder how she had ended up hosting a tea party, especially when it hadn't even been part of her plans. Suddenly, she was interrupted by Lady Veronica, who confronted her, wanting to know why Javelian had been staring at them throughout the party and even let out a sigh. Javelian was taken aback when she realized what was happening. She had unknowingly made her emotions too obvious in front of them. Her response shocked Lady Veronica, as Javelian confessed that she was angry with Sir Mikhail. Lady Veronica demanded to know what Javelian meant by that. Lady Flo Yen explained how the man had taken advantage of her, and how she had mistakenly believed his kindness was genuine. These words were unacceptable to Lady Veronica, who seemed to imply that Sir Mikhail was doing the same to her right then. Seeing Veronica's reaction, Javelian understood her pain. She had been in the same position before, unable to admit it to herself. Wanting to avoid being rude, Javelian apologized for making Lady Veronica uncomfortable and assured her she hadn't meant to hurt her. Lady Terence, however, couldn't hold back her tears. She didn't want to face the painful truth that all of Mikhail's actions had been nothing but an act. Javelian knew she was being overly vocal, but she couldn't just stand by and watch, seeing her past self in Lady Terence. After excusing herself, Javelian repeated that she would continue to host the tea party as promised, and told Lady Veronica it was fine if she didn't wish to attend. Meanwhile, Sir Mikhail was warning Max that he wouldn't be safe after provoking him earlier. He added that since Max had started the conflict, he wouldn't hold back. He wanted Max to know exactly where he stood. But before Mikhail could make a move, he was shocked by how quickly Max acted. A second later, Mikhail was kicked to the ground. The knight winced in pain from the blow and wondered how Max was so strong. While Mikhail was still reeling, Javelian's lover mocked him, saying that people like him truly belonged on the ground. Furious, Sir Mikhail demanded to know who Max was and why he was beside Javelian. Max stared at him coldly, replying that it was none of his business. Without warning, Mikhail pressed his sword to Max's neck and demanded an answer, threatening to cut his throat if he didn't comply. Unfazed, Max proudly declared that he was Javilian's lover. The knight found it hard to believe. Lady Flo Yen, in his eyes, would never fall for a commoner. He pressed further, wondering what Max had to gain from being with her. At that moment, their attention was drawn to Javilian, who called Mikhail by his full name, Mikhail Albert Hessen, and ordered him to drop his sword immediately. Max was a bit disappointed. He had been hoping to get in one more kick, but Lady Flo Yen was warning Mikhail to obey her orders. Since Mikhail was stubborn, Javilian repeated her demand, this time with more urgency, while the other ladies began gathering outside to see what was happening. Sir Mikhail hesitated but still didn't obey. He called her name, Javilian, but she gave him a sharp look and reminded him to address her as Lady Flo Yen instead. Her high status demanded it. Mikhail remembered how the Javilian he once knew had allowed him to call her by her first name. But now, it seemed she wanted a distance between them, all because of that commoner. He demanded to know what she was doing with someone like Max, but the lady countered by asking why he had drawn his sword against her lover. The knight tried to explain, blaming Max for everything and defending his actions. But Max interrupted him, reminding Mikhail once again to call Javilian Lady Flo Yen instead of her first name. This angered Mikhail, and he made a move to draw his sword again. Javilian, however, warned him that if her father heard how a palace knight had drawn his sword so recklessly, he would be deeply disappointed. Realizing he was in trouble, Mikhail tried to explain himself, but Javilian ignored him and walked past him to check on Max instead. Unable to do anything about it, Mikhail simply watched as Javilian asked her lover if he was all right. She told him to stay inside, but Max, finding the room too stuffy, couldn't stand sitting there any longer. Lady Flo Yen apologized, acknowledging how uncomfortable it must have been for him to be alone in the room. Meanwhile, Mikhail couldn't overhear their intimate conversation any longer. In a sudden impulsive move, Mikhail grabbed Javilian's hand, claiming he could explain himself. But he didn't realize that Javilian winced in pain from his grip. Max, furious at Mikhail's rude behavior, told him to release her if he still valued his life. Javilian, however, stopped her lover, surprising him. She wanted to handle the situation herself. Max couldn't understand why she was insisting on dealing with Mikhail alone, especially when Mikhail was clearly hurting her. But Javilian calmly asked him to wait. She politely asked Max if he could wait for her while she spoke to the knight. It was hard for him to accept, but he managed to control himself. As the tension escalated, Mikhail, misunderstanding Javilian's request, assumed she had chosen him over Max and mocked her lover inside his head. The prince, unwilling to upset Javilian by disobeying her, reluctantly agreed to wait while Sir Mikhail suggested they go to a quieter place to talk. But a moment later, Lady Flo Yen turned to Mikhail with a cold expression and ordered him to release her hand. She even added that it was highly rude of him to lay his hands on a lady, leaving Mikhail stunned by her unexpected response. As he processed her words, Javilian repeated herself firmly and ordered to let go of her hand immediately. Sir Mikhail was still in shock, a reaction Lady Juvel had expected. She had never used her status to intimidate him before, treating him as an equal despite his lower rank. But that had to change at that moment. She repeated herself one last time, demanding that he let go of her hand. Her firm words snapped him back to his senses. Lady Juvel could have charged him with assault for forcing her hand, but instead she simply reminded him not to make the same mistake with others. She then turned to her lover, signaling that she was done with the conversation. Max, however, said he was willing to wait if she still had more to say. But before they could leave, Sir Mikhail shouted her name, asking why she had chosen Max over him and why she was ignoring him now. He even accused her lover of starting it all, calling him a rude, uneducated peasant. Mikhail questioned if Juvel's actions were a ploy to make him notice her. Juvel couldn't believe her ears, and neither could Max when Mikhail insulted him. Max, a prince, thought himself more educated than Mikhail, and Juvel realized that Mikhail still assumed she was the same girl who had chased after him for 2 years. To make it clear, she firmly told him she had no interest in him anymore. Mikhail protested, reminding her that she had once declared her love for him and no one else. She didn't deny it. Yes, it had been true in the past, but it was all over now. She had no feelings left for him. Mikhail seemed crushed by her words. As she walked away, Juvel warned him not to speak to her again. She no longer wanted anything to do with him. With the commotion now over, the other ladies quickly excused themselves, frightened by Sir Mikhail's fury. His thoughts kept replaying Lady Flo Yen's words, but he couldn't bring himself to accept them. Just then Lady Veronica approached, grabbing his hand in concern. To her surprise, he violently shook her off, telling her to stop clinging to him like an insect. He didn't even care that she fell to the ground. His irritation was clear. Lady Veronica was stunned. Just moments ago he had been sweet to her, even asking her out on a date. Now he treated her as though she were nothing. As the realization sank in, her tears began to fall. She now understood Lady Flo Yen's words all too well. It was exactly how she had been treated before. Meanwhile, Sir Mikhail's anger simmered. He couldn't accept that Juval had discarded him so easily. He vowed to make her love him again. In their carriage on the way back, Juval stared at Max. Silence hung between them, but Max eventually noticed her gaze. He asked why she was looking at him, and she responded that she had something to say. At first, Juval thought the situation had been resolved, but then she remembered Max's impulsive actions, including his confrontation with Mikhail. His behavior had been reckless, as had his earlier actions with Baron Gordon. She realized she needed to discipline him. She gently told Max to be more careful with his actions around others, but Max defended himself, insisting he was already being cautious. Juval clarified that she was talking about his fight with Mikhail, warning that it could have led to trouble if he was so reckless. Max misunderstood, thinking she saw him as weak and incapable of defeating Mikhail. She tried to explain that she wasn't talking about his strength, but about how insulting a noble could cause serious problems. He interrupted, boasting that he could easily defeat Mikhail, even if there were 10 of him. Juval, frustrated, tried again to explain that it wasn't about being weak, it was about avoiding trouble. She asked him what he would do if something happened to him. Max stubbornly insisted that nothing could harm him, which only annoyed Juval further. She stood up and moved closer to him, her voice soft but firm as she explained she was simply worried about him. She told him not to be overconfident, even if he was strong. Sometimes he could face multiple enemies at once, and they would strike the moment they saw his weakness. She remembered a painful memory from her past. Despite having a hero for a father and being the daughter of a duke, everyone had abandoned her when she needed them most. The only option left to her had been death, a memory that still haunted her. Max noticed the sadness in her eyes and realized she was on the verge of tears. He agreed to follow her advice, willing to do whatever she asked. Juval was surprised by how easily he agreed, and it made her wonder if he truly understood everything she had said. He then clarified if what she meant was that he should back down from nobles. Juval smiled and nodded, glad that he had understood, even if it had been difficult to convince him. Max pulled his hand away, reflecting on how satisfying it was to teach people a lesson, but seeing Juval's happy face made him reconsider. He thought that if she was this concerned about him, maybe he could try being more agreeable. The next day, Max was invited to the Floyen mansion, where Lady Juval promised to treat him to a meal for his hard work. He was excited, thinking it would be just the two of them, but he was surprised to find that her father, the Duke, would also be joining them. When he arrived, the Duke coldly asked what he was waiting for, eyeing him with an intense gaze. Max felt nervous and immediately decided to accept the invitation to sit beside his master, sensing the heavy atmosphere surrounding him. Before he could sit down, Max stared at his master, thinking that despite knowing him for over a decade, he still couldn't read what was on his mind. Meanwhile, the Duke simply fixed him with a cold stare, waiting for him to take his seat. Juvelian hadn't expected her father to be at home, and she certainly hadn't expected her lover to act the way he was. She reached out to catch his attention, her hand gently clasping his, and whispered that if he was nervous because of her father, he could sit next to her. When the soup was served, Juvelian began teaching Max about proper table manners, telling him to use the outermost spoon. He was confused. It wasn't that he didn't know what to do, he'd been taught table manners at the age of 5. But as he was about to correct her, he saw the look in her eyes. She wanted him to trust her, to accept her help. He hesitated, but ultimately agreed. A moment later, a servant entered to announce that steak would be served as the main course, and asked how they would like it prepared. Juvelian immediately replied that she wanted it medium rare, then added that Max should have his steak prepared the same way. She didn't know that he disliked undercooked food, and he wanted to explain it to her. But as she continued to guide him through the meal, he missed his chance to speak up. The Duke observed the exchange, his gaze hardening as he watched his daughter shower Max with affection. He couldn't help but think that she was being deceived again, just as she had been in the past. As Juvelian wiped Max's mouth, the Duke muttered under his breath, thinking that she shouldn't trust men so easily. When the steak was finally served, Max found himself staring at it, thinking that he always ate steak and could easily have it every day if he wanted to. But before he could process it, Juvelian suddenly reached for his plate, offering to cut his steak for him. He wanted to protest. He wasn't a child anymore, and besides, her father was watching them. Just then, the Duke furiously called out his daughter's name, his voice sharp with disapproval. The Duke could not accept that Max was letting Juvelian cut his food. Gripping his knife, he offered to do it himself. Max froze, wondering if the Duke intended to do something much worse, especially given the way he was holding that sharp thing on his hand. The Duke ordered his daughter to pass Max's plate to him. Juvelian assumed he was doing it to make peace with his student, so she complied. As he began cutting the steak, the Duke made a comment about how the outside looked different from the inside. He glanced at Max, as if to suggest that Max, too, was pretending to love his daughter. The prince locked eyes with his master, silently communicating that the Duke was no better, acting as though he had accepted their relationship. On the other side of the table, Juvelian was too focused on the steak's preparation to notice the silent exchange between the two men. The Duke continued his speech. You must always be careful when things appear different on the outside. You might end up seeing blood. His words were direct, as if he were speaking to Max, warning him against pretending to love his Juval. Max glanced at his master, wanting to say the same thing back to him. But Javelian, completely unaware of the silent tension between the two men, was too preoccupied with the possibility that the chef had made a mistake with the steak's preparation. Without warning, the Duke offered to cut Javelian's steak as well. She was surprised but assumed that since he had cut Max's, it would be strange for him to leave her steak untouched. She thanked him politely. As he sliced her meat, the Duke suggested that they have tea together after the meal. The idea irked Max. He had hoped for some alone time with Javelian. The lady, however, couldn't help but notice how her father seemed to care about his student. After her father, the Duke, suggested that the three of them have some tea after their meal. Javelian proposed they drink the tea she had personally prepared. Both men were intrigued and pleased by the idea. They looked forward to tasting the tea she had made. Just then, the servant returned with a message for the Duke from the palace. The Emperor had ordered him to come immediately. Javelian, recognizing the urgency, suggested that they postpone the tea, but the Duke waved her off as he insisted that it was not that urgent. His daughter couldn't believe her ears, but the Duke dismissed the servant and declared that their tea was more important. Max, surprisingly, supported his master's decision. Reluctantly, Javelian agreed, and the three of them sat down to drink the tea she had prepared. Despite her enjoyment of the tea, Javelian couldn't shake the worry disturbing her. She feared that her father's disregard for the Emperor's summons might anger the royal family, which could have serious consequences for her in the future. After tasting the tea, the Duke remarked that it was incredible. Javelian was taken aback. It was the first time he had ever praised her like that. But she wasn't sure if he was referring to the tea or something else entirely. Max, who wasn't fond of tea, commented that the aroma was pleasant. Javelian, knowing he didn't care for it, simply accepted the compliment and hoped that the tea was indeed as good as it seemed. At least she didn't have to worry about the upcoming tea party she had to host. Suddenly, the Duke announced that he wanted to speak with his student alone. Javelian, knowing their conversation was important, excused herself and left the room. Once she was gone, the Duke's temper flared and asked what he was planning with his daughter while glaring at Max. He wanted his answer as to why he had been loitering around her. Max, equally frustrated, wanted the Duke to explain what he meant by planning to his daughter. But as he was about to explain further, he stopped, unsure of why he had been doing so much for her. The Duke, however, seemed to see through him and said that he at least couldn't lie about his feelings as he had been acting as though he loves her. The word love caught Max off guard, wondering if he was really like that to the lady. The Duke, seeing his reaction, continued that his daughter, Juval, had already been hurt so much, so he should stop pretending that he loved her. For a moment, Max was silent. But then, to the Duke's surprise, he spoke up, his expression one the Duke had never seen before. Max said quietly that he might really love Javelian. The Duke froze, taken aback by the unexpected admission. The tension between them deepened, and the room seemed to grow colder. For the time being, I'll end this here. Did you enjoy the manhwa? If so, then check back for part 7. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for more.